in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It is Monday, ladies and gentlemen. It's raining, it's pouring. I don't know what's going on. I mean, we've had such a lovely summer so far, but we've woken as if we live in somewhere like Manchester or Scotland or Hull or somewhere like that, where people always complain to me and say, but it's not sunny here. It's actually dark. I'm looking out the window. Emma Wolf is here with us. Very good morning to you, Emma.
Morning.
Just reminding me this is what it's going to be like for most of the winter, you know. So just in case you're getting too happy about the weather, here we are. Anyway, it's not about the weather this morning. It's all about, yes, you guessed it, Keir Starmer, the latest scenario going on with him. This morning, front page is all very different, actually, but he's got yet another massive battle on his hands after having had all the drama last week of Rachel Reeves and her tears, the whole idea that the disability bill was completely and utterly kiboshed by the backbenchers. He's now got a new fight on his hands, and this is on the front page of The Guardian and, of course, several other newspapers as well. Prime Minister facing fresh revolt on special needs, it says on the front page of The Times. Apparently, Sir Keir Starmer's facing a fresh backbench revolt after ministers refused to guarantee millions of children the legal right to special needs support in schools. So I'm afraid he's out of the frying pan and into the fire. Meanwhile, as they look around and figure out they've actually run out of money already, even though they've only been in for 1 year, I hope you enjoyed celebrating that on Friday. Labour are willing to explore a wealth tax, it says on the front page of The Telegraph. Former leader Lord Kinnock backs a raid on the rich and suggests it is being considered. Well, we had that Green Party MP on who was telling me all about the wealth tax because they think it's a great idea. The trouble is it doesn't work. Anywhere they've done it, it just doesn't work. And we've got also some figures over the weekend of the number of wealthy people, millionaires in particular, fleeing the country. So many of them go to the UAE, by the way. If you're going after people for being rich, you could go after Wayne Rooney. You could do worse than that. He's on the front page of The Sun today. He's done a new deal with the BBC for Match of the Day. Guess how much he's getting? He's not quite tipping the scales of Gary Lineker. £800,000, a 2-year deal to be a Match of the Day regular and a BBC World Cup 2026 panellist. It's a great signing, say the BBC. That's kind of what it sounds like when Wayne Rooney's That's what you get for your 800,000. Money well spent? I don't think so. Police chiefs on the front of the Daily Mail, they say the smell of cannabis is a sign of crime. Genius. Hurrah! What you mean if there's a bunch of youth sitting around smoking weed, they might actually be up to no good. They might actually be committing other crimes as well. I mean, goodness gracious me. I was at Wimbledon, by the way, at the weekend, and it was fantastic. We'll talk about that. But also, you might remember last week my conversation with Rupert Bell, because they've done away with line judges this year for the first time. And guess what? It was a massive blunder yesterday because somebody switched off the automatic line judge. So when balls were going out, nobody was marking them as going out because they got rid of the humans. Absolutely mad. It's 5 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. Welcome to Morning Glory. And so, the rain is going to last, I think, for about another couple of hours, maybe through the show. I think by 10 o'clock it's going to be over.
Normal people are up and working. It'll be fine. It'll be dry again.
It'll be gone, and it'll probably be quite nice as well. But, you know, it's not that bad to have a bit of rain.
No, it was quite bad. It reminded me this morning. So when you cycle in...
I mean, it's heavy.
No, I know, but it's such... It's
you
like,
cycled in?
Yeah.
Well,
and it's two different worlds. No, but for weeks it's just been this glorious thing. You get up at 4... Sorry, what?
It's your own fault.
Yes, it's my own fault. You get up 4 in the morning, it's light, you sort of fly along, you think, oh, it's so gorgeous cycling in the city, you go over London Bridge, you see Tower Bridge, all of that. When it's raining and it's dark, you literally roll something up into a plastic bag, you got your cycling gear on, it's grim, it's horrible.
Do you need, like, proper goggles so you can actually see?
The whole lot, and then the buses go past and they go really close to give you a wall of water. They spray you, and the vans, they spray you with water. So it's really unpleasant. But
well,
I was coming here, so it was okay.
Like a grown-up, I was actually in a car, which had a roof and sides and everything. So I didn't get that wet, but I did have an umbrella just to get walking down to it. But, you know, everything that you might expect to be at the beginning of the week is here. It's one of those days, isn't it, where everybody's sort of slightly got a different story. There's no major problem going on. But it hasn't been a great weekend for Keir Starmer, as ever.
After an appalling week. I mean, a terrible week. Not only the kind of welfare, the massive U-turn on that, which was just about to kind of explode, and then Rachel Reeves, two tears Reeves? Yeah. 2 Tears Reeves
unbelievable,
sobbing in the chamber on Wednesday, which was not really explained.
But then even more bizarrely, on Thursday, suddenly
big loving,
looking like for all the world, she didn't have a care in the world, and saying, "Oh, I had a bad day at the office." And we talked about this quite a bit on Friday's show, because that was the official sort of 1 year anniversary, and it was all very odd. They were all sort of walking around, hugging each other, rictus grins, everything's going really well. We had Wes Streeting on the next day. Chris Evans had the Prime Minister came in, and they were all very busy telling us that Rachel's fine.
Hard bastard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then he came out with that, didn't he, over the weekend?
What was that about?
Why is he always trying to pretend he's something he's not?
It's just, exactly. It's so inappropriate. Well, anyway, it's inappropriate for a Prime Minister to say that kind of thing. But for Keir Starmer to try and punch, when he tried to punch a punch bag, or when he stands around with the military, it's sort of, I think
a bit cringe,
he does protest too much.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple of videos, because you might as well start where you mean to go on. This was one that he made over the weekend. He continues to make these rather pointless, nebulous videos, which seem to say nothing at all. And I'm not quite sure what the point of them is, but I'm sure somebody can tell me. Here he is saying how he's made Britain fairer for everyone.
Across Britain, people get up every morning to go to work, to get their kids to school. They pay their bills, try to save a bit. They graft. The factory workers, small business owners, teachers, carers, those who serve our country, whether that's in scrubs or the uniform of their regiment. The ordinary people, the men and women who make this country what it is.
Yeah.
Did he say whether that's in scrubs or in the military?
I mean, just
who
incredible.
is scripting this stuff?
I know.
And why does he go on doing it? Every single post that he puts out on X is roundly pilloried. All that he gets from these messages that keep coming out, almost obsessively coming out on social media, are widely, mocked, derided and abused. Yeah. And he keeps on pumping them out.
He does.
And these pointless videos.
Every single one of them.
Who is in charge?
Yeah. And every single one of them has a complete just litany of abuse and insults because nobody buys it, nobody believes it. He's not helping anybody. I mean, only yesterday, online, last night, I saw this. Rachel Reeves' tax hikes have been blamed for putting 69,000 people out of work across pubs, restaurants and hotels. The hospitality sector is absolutely dying. And they're saying if you don't reverse this, it's going to be 200,000 people out of work by probably the end of the year in hospitality alone. And he's talking about people that go to work in hospitality and making a fairer society. Well, it's not fair if you're getting fired, is it?
But he's literally talking to the people that they are punishing.
Yeah.
He just sits there and says this stuff about every day working people wake up and pay their bills and try to save a bit. As if you wake up, pay your bills and try to save it.
Yeah.
It's just
and take the
sort
kids
of
to school.
Odd. Yeah, but it's a very kind of idea of what he thinks someone or someone thinks he should be saying.
Yeah, I know.
And the reality, as you say, Mike, is so different. Their policies on employment, on employers who have small businesses, and they're having the national insurance hiked. All of that stuff is damaging genuine, striving, working people in this country.
Working people, you have to say it like that.
No, but you do. I don't mean working class people. I mean people who are just trying to get on with it and just work, and who aren't on benefits, and who aren't claiming this, that and the other, and motability cars, and disability for acne, and all of this stuff.
We're going to be revisiting that actually later on today. But also, you know, we watched this happening last week on the show. Many people getting in touch with us. Not millionaires, you know, not people who had, you know, multiple homes across the world, but people who were saying their kids, you know, leaving university, they're leaving the country because they don't see any hope job-wise for them here. People who are sort of coming close to retirement saying, you know, we've got a little bit of a nest egg, but we're leaving. I mean, this morning we got a story in the front of the Express saying they're thinking of putting a tax on pensioners so that, you know, their income will suddenly be taxed.
Pension.
You know, so forget they're going to tax the wealth, they're going to tax everybody. Harry Cole yesterday put out a picture of absolute despair. Millionaire migration in 2025. These are figures that have been put together over the course of the last few weeks. The UAE has got something like nearly 10,000 people deserting Britain to go and live there. 7,500 going to the US, 3,500 going to Italy, 3,000 going to Switzerland, Saudi Arabia 2,400, Singapore, Portugal, Greece. The list goes on. You know, this is not a small thing that's happening.
This isn't, Mike, and we've said for months, I genuinely know people, you know, in my life who are leaving, who are actually just saying this is not, you know, on every level, in every part of their lives, the UK is no longer pleasant. And it's not just about education or about high tax or whatever. It's the fact that how we feel and living in our streets in a country that used to be ours no longer feels like no longer feels like England.
Let's have a look at another Starmer video from the weekend. This is his tribute to Formula One.
We love driving in the United Kingdom. It's in our blood. I still remember when we got our first car. It was a Ford Cortina. Of course, it's not just the drivers, it's the whole team. I absolutely need one team working with me on everything that we do, and the same for Formula One. It's an engine of growth, supporting more than 40,000 jobs with vast opportunities for apprentices.
It really is.
He'll jump on any boundary.
I just watching your face there, watching that. I mean, everybody's just kind of going, what?
No.
What's he talking about? Oh, Britain's a place where we love driving. Well, what do you keep finding everybody to go over 20 miles an hour for?
Exactly.
You know,
and making it almost impossible, impossible to drive around London. I mean, the war on drivers specifically, I don't know how bad it is in the rest of the country. I know it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Well,
everywhere.
Trying to get anywhere.
No, it's pretty bad anywhere you go. I mean, there's congested roads, there's potholes, there's speed cameras, you know, there's...
The state of our roads in the centre of London has always been, to me, it's a microcosm of how bad it is. If the city of London, with all its wealth, has literally craters and roadworks all over it, what is the rest of the UK like? And as for, you know, we're a city of drivers and we used to have a Ford Cortina.
Right.
And there's Lisa Nandy, for those people listening. Lisa Nandy lying down in Downing Street doing a sort of, you know, virtual reality. What was that about?
I don't know. But, I mean, you know, I bet the Ford Cortina story's not real either. I bet he didn't have a Ford Cortina.
I bet you he didn't.
Somebody's probably gone, yeah, say that, because that's a nice working class...
Because that's vaguely in the 60s.
It's a working class car, and, you know, it's not any... Because don't say, for God's sake, don't say he had an Audi or anything like that, or a Mercedes. You know, his dad ran a factory.
Dad was a toolmaker.
He wasn't poor. He was not poor.
No, I know.
So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Somebody will go back and check and see whether actually...
I hope they do. And I genuinely feel sometimes...
I wonder if anyone set fire to it. Sorry, I just came about that randomly. I can't imagine what made me think
You
of
need
that.
to look up a good model agency.
Yeah,
for that.
exactly. But this is the other thing, you know, why is he banging on about all this sort of nonsense about Formula One? It's like he owns Formula One. He doesn't own it.
It's got nothing to do with him. He's like, oh, that's happening at Silverstone. Oh, that's a good British thing that we can celebrate.
Yeah.
That's how their thinking goes.
It's not just him, of course. David Lammy also did one of these tributes, right, to himself about what a great year.
While giving away billions to Syria.
I tweeted out. You've given away billions to the Chagos Islands and handed away our sovereign territory.
I'm paid for the privilege.
You've also somehow made an enemy of Israel over the course of the year, and you've managed to make the USA distrust us with any kind of sensitive information, so they don't tell us anything. So brilliant. Have a look.
1 year on as Foreign Secretary, we've stood firm as Ukraine's leading supporter, redoubled the special relationship, reconnected with Europe, reset ties with the global south, rebalanced our approach in the Middle East, and we've rewired the FCDO, progressive and realist. We will press on with our plan for change, tackling irregular migration, confronting the climate and nature crisis, supporting the world's most vulnerable, creating good British jobs. This is foreign policy with purpose. Britain restored on the world stage.
It's like they're doing a presentation for some kind of internal conference meeting.
Yeah.
You know, make this point, make that point.
But do it really fast so that
really
it doesn't.
fast.
None of it needs to make sense.
He's
rebuilding this, rebuilding that.
He's reset the relationship with the EU. According to a piece in the Mail today, Starmer's going to be humiliated as a landmark migrant deal. This is the one in, one out one. Is going to be scuppered by the EU. So
Brussels don't like it.
No. They don't
so
want
we've got Macron,
well, it doesn't make any sense, right? Macron's coming here,
arriving tomorrow for a state visit. Well, can he leave, please? I don't want him hanging around here. Then on Thursday, something else is happening on Thursday. There's going to be this big humiliation, another one for Starmer.
Right.
Big humiliation, because you know what? 1 in, 1 out. Brussels have said we don't want the people back.
No.
So I've got an idea. How about none in? And 5 out.
Right.
How about we actually start...
Well, how about none in and 150,000 out?
But how about we actually just start saying it goes that way, right?
Yeah.
When you come in illegally, you don't come in illegally.
No, you just can't do it.
And there was one boat, didn't they? They slashed one boat with knives on Friday. And then that was all exciting because they'd actually slashed the boat.
Slashed the snaggling
They'd
guns,
slashed
gangs.
the buggling bananas, whatever.
Right.
So they'd slashed the boat, but then the French police, I think, have clarified, no, we're not. That's not our policy. That was just one boat that we slashed.
And here's where they've got it wrong, right? There's a great big spread in the Sun today. Borders crisis out of control. The Great Escape. Almost 4 times as many boat migrants slipping past French cops. Here's where they've got it completely wrong. Yvette Cooper, right, has now made it clear that if you do an online clip glorifying channel crossings, it will be made a crime. So it's not a crime to enter the country illegally, but it's a crime to make a video about it. That's what's wrong with the government.
That's okay then.
They've picked the
so
wrong
that'll
thing.
stop them, Mike. That'll stop them.
Yeah.
They can't do their little video.
You can come in for free.
Because they were literally on boats doing selfies.
And we'll give you a house, but if you make a film of it, we might arrest you.
It's completely
What's going on?
Crazy.
Absolutely bonkers mad.
It just shows how out of control. I mean, look at them. They're literally running through the water. It's now become a thing to kind of, cross the channel.
It's like Chariots of Fire, isn't it? You know, Chariots
That's
of Fire.
exactly like the Chariots
brackets the migrant edition.
You
know, I mean,
someone
ridiculous.
should do that with the Chariots of Fire music.
Should. Actually, they should. I've got so many good ideas this morning. I don't know where to begin.
I know.
It's because I went to Wimbledon. I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Wimbledon was an amazing day. I haven't been there since I was a teenager, which tells you that was a very long time ago.
Yeah.
The 1970s was when I used to go, because you could get in for free, and it was long before. But you know, I was lucky enough to be in Centre Court. I was invited by a very good friend of mine, and we sat there and we watched as they introduced, because it's a middle Saturday, so they introduced all the sporting legends that, like Ian Botham was there.
Yeah.
Graham Souness, Denise Lewis, you know, a whole bunch of Paralympians, and they all got a round of applause. Jeff Hurst was their World Cup winner. But the biggest cheer was when, at the end, they said, and we just want to thank all the members of the armed forces who are here.
Yeah.
And as I listened to the cheer, I thought to myself, this is Britain.
Yeah.
You know, this is what Britain is,
Yeah.
right? It's not, you know, the horrible, nasty, ruined streets of some of our inner city areas, which have been kind of, you know, colonised by what I would regard as the wrong kind of people. You know, it's not about Palestine action, marching around. It's not about Black Lives Matter. It's about Britain. You know, and it's got nothing to do with colour. It's got nothing to do with, you know, religion. It was just people who all there wanted to applaud the people that really do put their lives on the line. And I thought it was wonderful.
Absolutely.
And it kind of restored my faith slightly in this country.
Slightly, but it's only a moment. It's a moment in one summer, isn't it? Wimbledon is only a couple of weeks. Yeah, we should be celebrating and proud of that kind of thing. I know, and it gives you that feeling almost close to tears, where you think there is still Britain here,
Yeah.
but it's just kind of got so lost. What a waste.
Part of that reason it's got lost, though, is because of things like, I'm just looking at the front page of the Times, the King is going to use the 20th anniversary of the tragic events of 7/7, because that's what the anniversary is today, of course, to stand firm against those who would seek to divide us. He's going to make a statement before today's memorial service for the victims in St Paul's Cathedral, I believe it is, and he's going to talk about a chance to reaffirm our commitment to building a society where people of all faiths and backgrounds can live together with mutual respect and understanding, always standing firm against those who would seek to divide us. What, like the people that actually tried to blow us up?
Well, exactly.
You know, there's no mention of the bombers.
How
really.
about the commemoration for those people whose lives were either ended or completely changed on 7/7? Mike, can you just tell me, where were you on that day? Do you remember that day?
Do you know, I think I was in America at the time. Because I guess I think, actually, was I in America or was I in Scotland? I think I was in Scotland, actually. But the reason I think I was in America was because when they had the second attempt, which was on the 21st, I'd just flown back because bizarrely I had a meeting with Gordon Brown in the Treasury, right? And I got off the train at Paddington, having flown down from London, from Glasgow, and suddenly everything was at a standstill. There was, like, you couldn't get a mobile signal, there was no taxis, you know, the trains were all down because nothing had actually happened. It had failed on the 21st.
And it was such a... Do you remember on 7/7 they didn't really know what was going on, and there was their mobiles, but they were sort of cut across London. It was just before social media with all the speculation, and people really didn't know. People were trying to call it, but 20 years. It's amazing to think it was 20 years.
I know, absolutely awful, terrible. But I just would like to hear people being
talking
a bit more
about that,
kind of, you know, denouncing it a bit more, as opposed to saying, oh, people try to divide us, you know, kind of lumping everybody in together, like, you know.
Oh, let's welcome the people that are actually trying to destroy the fabric.
You know, it's somehow everybody's fault for trying to be divisive because they might have said something that might have been, you know, nasty about Muslims blowing people up. You know, and I always get that impression that it's an opportunity, surely, to denounce extremists.
Exactly.
Not to say this is what makes London great because we're all united in our, you know...
Well, some might say quite the opposite. Some might say that's the beginning of all these issues. I mean, you look at this, you know, there's another story about prisons being overrun with Islamic terrorists, basically using prisons like universities of crime. Teaching people how to, you know...
We'll come back to that. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Lots more for us to do, of course. It's coming up to 22 minutes past 6. Plenty going on. Johnny Rugby says, morning, Mike. After watching 1 year of chaos, my hatred for Starmer is even more rabid than ever. If Farage gets in, I sincerely hope he'll consider stripping Starmer, Hermer and Khan of the undeserved knighthoods for their disgraceful and blatant betrayal of the UK and its citizens. I'm very peed off. Well, interesting, and you should say that, because if you haven't seen it yet, 1 year of chaos went out on Friday night. You can still catch it on YouTube. You can get it pretty much any time you want. Just go and look for it. I've been tweeting about it at the weekend and, of course, on Facebook as well. Let's get a voice note, shall we?
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. I'm one of these working people. I got up at 5. I've done my ironing. I've cleaned the kitchen. I've emptied the dishwasher. All the usual guff. Made sandwiches. And now I'm walking the dog. And very, very shortly I'm going to be going to work. And, I'm going to graft. And I might, if I'm lucky, save a little bit. But do I think it's fair? I seem to be an increasing minority of people that do that and don't claim benefits or sit on the backsides and do nothing. And I'm not talking about those that deserve it, 'cause my daughter's disabled. I know what it's all about. Is it fair? Is this country fair? Not a chance.
Phil, very well put. Thank you very much indeed, and hope you enjoy walking the dog in the rain, if it is raining.
So well put, Mike. That's what I mean. I don't mean...
And that's Britain as well.
But that is literally just getting on with your life, not expecting handouts. You know, yes, getting help for, say, his disabled daughter if she needs it and when she needs it, but just getting on with it and doing the stuff and getting up early and then going to work and doing it all. Not in a kind of working people kind of quotes Starmer way, but actually just quietly earning your living.
No. Not like the doctors who want to go on strike because they want another 29% pay rise.
29% pay rise.
We'll come back to all of that as well. I'm here, Emma Wolf is here. Welcome to Morning Glory. It's Monday morning. We are indeed hammering through July. It's Monday the 7th. It's the anniversary of 7/7. We'll talk about that as well. This is Morning Glory. Bye.
It's basically calling on the government to come forward with a discussion document to look at the issues around benefits received by foreign nationals as distinct from British nationals. We believe that there is a case for looking at restricting those benefits to those who are British nationals rather than foreign nationals. But we want to have a discussion document because we appreciate that there are all sorts of issues that then come into play around that. But we think it's an important area that we should be looking at in terms of controlling the welfare bill.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 26 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. Don't forget, there is, of course, a podcast that you can get your hands on as well, should you so wish. Let's get another voice note.
Morning, Mike, Claire. It's Andy from Birmingham. Oh, you're going to have to cheer me up. Got up this morning, raining, you're cheering me up. But going on about the French slashing these boats, if anybody has got like a pea of a brain will realise it's only for one thing only, because the community of Gaelic lad is coming over for a state visit, so they can just go, we are smashing the guns for UK. You know what they're like? Absolutely unreal, mate. And I'm sure at the end of that, I can hear the director go, cut, after they've slashed the boats. Anyway, have a great day. Ta-ra.
Yeah, Andy, thanks very much.
I love a good Brummy accent.
Yeah,
Andy, you could just talk all day. That's brilliant.
Yeah, rain is brilliant.
Raining.
Just before we go on to the more serious matter of the police and what on earth they're up to, let's just talk about this Wimbledon Hawkeye situation, because I was going on last week about having discovered that they were doing away with line judges for the first time ever. I said, we had Rupert Bell on, our Royal correspondent, who's also down at Wimbledon. And I said, well, what, you know, it seems odd to me. And in fact, looking at it, it looked like there was something missing. It looks as though they should have been standing there. You know, because again, part of the sort of tradition of Britain was that we'd have these rather oddly shaped people, occasionally not looking like fashion icons, standing there, you know, out, putting their arms out like that, here, you know, making noises.
Wimbledon.
It was part of the fun. And they've now got a disembodied voice. So that
Why?
You know,
Why? What's the reasoning for getting rid of
Rupert? It's all about progress. Almost every other Grand Slam tournament does the same thing. They don't have line judges. They want to try and get rid of human error effectively. But they didn't really have human error, because if the call was wrong, then the player challenged it, and they had that quite exciting moment where you'd wait for the Hawkeye to be put on the big screen, and people would be clapping, and that was all quite good. So that's all gone, right? And so the umpire now has that. But whenever there's a ball that's called out in the middle of a rally, it's an AI voice. So they've got somebody calling out, but it's not the umpire. Anyway, so yesterday, the top brass went on and on about how brilliant it all was, but there was a massive mistake. There was no hiding it. There was a massive claim on centre court because somebody switched it off. And I mean, obviously you could call that operator error, but it happened.
Exactly.
And so the line call wasn't made, and they called a fault on a ball that was obviously so far out. That it should have been, you know, the game was the result of the game was reversed.
And the players were not happy either, were they?
No, she should have won. This is a Russian player called Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova.
Yeah, that was the big game yesterday. The big women's game.
There was a clear error when she should have won the game point at 4-4 on serve in the opening set. She hit a shot, her opponent had hit a shot well below the baseline, beyond the baseline, but the technology failed to call it out.
Do you think it's odd that they got rid of the line judges? Because actually it is part of Wimbledon, it's part of the tradition, it's part of the way the court looks and everything, so, you know.
Yeah, I just think it's unfortunate.
And it doesn't...
And because of this, it proves my point that, you know, it's all very well saying, let's do away with human error and let's just have automation. But if automation doesn't work properly because somebody switched it off, then it's no use.
Well, but Mike, I've said this for years about, you know, oh, everything's got to be cardless now. And then, well, guess what? When something goes wrong at M&S or at Tesco or at Sainsbury's, billions were wiped off the UK economy on those couple of days where no one could go in and pay actual cash. Or actual, and fair enough, I don't have cash on me to kind of go and do the shopping. We do rely on our cards. But when it doesn't work, then we're all in the doo-doo, aren't we?
But it's quite a good idea to keep some cash somewhere.
Of course it is.
Because obviously if the systems all go down, you can't get any cash out either.
But it's quite a good idea for the system to be able to still have tills and people that can actually scan your shopping and, like, Otherwise, you know, they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Or just add it up, yeah. Front page of the Mail, Britain's top police chiefs today urge their officers to crack down on cannabis. I mean, I don't know whether this is ever going to happen, but Andy Marsh, who leads the College of Policing, said frontline officers should do something about it.
Yeah, they really should.
I mean, everyone you talk to who comes anywhere to London or any other major city, you just smell it everywhere, don't you?
Everywhere. You smell it everywhere. Yesterday, I think it was in the Sunday Times or the Sunday Telegraph, we had Sir Mark Rowley saying, oh, I know, let's get rid of our 30 or 40 regional police forces. We want a mega.
Right.
We want 12, 15 mega forces.
Robo-cops.
The police, especially in terms of drugs and enforcement and any crime, really, they don't know what they're doing. Of course the smell of cannabis is a sign of crime. It's illegal. It should be.
Right.
But it's all over.
Yeah.
Do you think anybody smoking whatever on the streets thinks they're going to be arrested?
No,
I think a quarter of people are stopped and warned. They're not given a record. They're not charged. So it's a completely kind of lawless.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
crime.
They're saying inside, police hit out the distraction of non-crime hate incidents. They say that basically, you know, they've unfortunately damaged public trust because they've had so many of these non-crime hate incidents, which have become a distraction for the police in general. Well, that's easy, isn't it? Just stop arresting people for non-crime hate incidents. 133,000 recorded since they were introduced in 2014.
Yeah, and they're also very kind of weird, nebulous things. I'm offended by that. That's a non-crime hate incident.
Yeah.
You made me feel hated. You made me feel marginalised. The police should not be dealing with that, and they should not be dealing with social media stuff either.
No, exactly.
They should be out on the streets, and they should be dealing with crime.
Did you see that story yesterday about Monty Toms, who's the guy from the Together organisation, with Alan Miller and all of that?
Yeah.
And he was arrested by the police because he was carrying a placard in which he suggested that trans people were mentally ill, right? Which is a view that he's entitled to have.
Yeah.
Some people might not agree with it. But he was arrested for holding a placard. And he was taken to a police station and held for several hours. And I think he's coming on with Julie Hartley-Brewer later on this morning.
Brilliant.
You know, it's totally insane.
It is totally insane.
And he was standing there as they were doing it saying, why are you arresting me? You know, I haven't committed any crime. There is nothing in the statute books, basically, that says that I should be removed from the place that you're removing me from. I'm entirely entitled to stand here and say
because
what
it's
I want.
the thought police, Mike.
Yeah.
It's like the woman who was praying silently outside or near to an abortion clinic.
Right.
You know, you're not allowed to do that. You're not even allowed to think something
And he
different.
says, as he's being arrested, you know, the police are actually arresting me because of their opinion of what I'm doing, which is exactly right. So it's a massive freedom of speech issue.
Of course it is.
You know, and that's, you know, for the police chiefs to have to say to them, you know, would you mind actually arresting people for smoking cannabis when meanwhile they're actually arresting people for
shoplifting or for stealing phones or whatever.
But they're arresting guys like Monty for saying something that they don't like the sound of.
Of course.
And he said very clearly that there's definitely some kind of woke agenda going on.
Of course
because
there is.
as the police were questioning him, you could tell what they thought he was saying was objectionable.
Of course.
Well, it may well be objectionable, but that's not a reason to arrest somebody.
But we've seen two-tier policing, you know, for years now, haven't we? For the last couple of years specifically.
Exactly right.
And yet there's wall-to-wall coverage of the fact that an 83-year-old was arrested.
Yeah.
An 83-year-old lady was arrested moved on at was it Palestine Action?
Palestine Action, yeah. Who seemed to be just completely ripping the mickey out of the government because the government have prescribed them as a terrorist organisation. They've just gone, well, we're not having that.
But it seems to be taking them a couple of weeks. And
but it's like we're not having that, and so they're just going, well, we don't care, we're just going to carry on protesting.
We're going to carry on protesting, and they are going to set up, they've got a secret website they've set up, they've decided they're going to change the name.
Right.
Palestine Action, on front of Telegraph, are very, very clear. They're going to carry on, their action is not going to be changed by this, by being prescribed, and they'll just change the name, they'll do it under a different guise.
And that's
so,
what
I mean, that
people
is
said.
putting two fingers up to the government.
It is. And again, the government won't know what to do about that because they thought they'd done the right thing, but people did warn of this. They said if they change their name, they could just get around the law. And they could just call themselves something else. Bizarre. Let's get one more of these ridiculous clips from Labour. This is Bridget Phillipson. She was put out yesterday to Secretary of State for Education, and she clearly has a problem with, you know, class war, doesn't she? I mean, she is absolutely determined to rid Britain of anybody successful, anybody who's got money, anybody who likes working hard to get what they want. Have a look at her here.
Your colleague, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, said he'd give you 7 out of 10. What would you give yourselves as a government?
I think I'd be inclined to agree with Johnny. I think that's about right. I think we have made enormous strides forward in a lot of areas. Of course, there's more to do. And of course, we hear what voters are telling us, that they voted for change, they're impatient for change, they want to see it and feel it in their communities.
Yes, they voted for change. They certainly did, but they didn't vote for, being completely and utterly rendered unable to do anything because of the change. Pauline Hitchens says this: Morning, Mike and Emma. Today, for the first time in my life, or in her life, my wife is applying for benefits. She is on her third kidney transplant, which has failed, and she is now back on dialysis. She had her first dialysis session last week in 6 years. As a consequence, she has now lost the sight permanently in her left eye. Her mobility is awful. I push her in a wheelchair whenever we need to go anywhere. I work full-time, and I'm also her carer, unpaid. We have reached the point now where we need assistance, but what's the bet? Well, we will get bugger all. Well, I don't know what that situation is.
And look how long they've waited, and he's not even claiming.
Waited.
And I know people who are absolutely taking the mickey. Carer's allowance this, carer's allowance that for their elderly mum who's absolutely fine. And there he is, and he's not even claiming that for his wife.
That's what the system seems to encourage.
That's what the system is for.
It encourages people who know how to do it to rip it off, and it encourages and disencourages people who really need it to actually apply for stuff. But there we are. 6:36. I'm Mike Graham. Emma Wolf is here as well. We'll be back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 6:38. It is, of course, Monday the 7th of July. It's the anniversary of 7/7. And I've got this from Christopher, who sent this in on Twitter. On that dreadful day 20 years ago, I was in my executive office in Mayfair, whilst my network operations centre was in Aldgate. Our chief operations officer was going up the steps when the bomb blew him off his feet. Fortunately, he narrowly missed being badly injured and made his way to the office, only to find that his fiancée had been blown up on the Edgware Underground. She was uninjured. She was injured, but not life-changing. We all counted ourselves very lucky that awful day. My thoughts and prayers to all those affected. You do forget how many people were affected, because an awful lot of people who weren't actually terribly badly injured
and how
were massively affected by it.
Of course, and how it unfolded as well. We're just seeing images there of the bus in Tavistock Square, and I was working in publishing right on the Euston Road, right by there, and the office were calling saying, don't try and get back from your meeting, don't come in. And just that day, Mike, do you remember everybody was walking? So office workers were leaving the offices, and the streets of London were filled with thousands of people just walking and walking. And for weeks afterwards, people did not want to go near the tubes, trains, buses, anything. And it was a very eerie, weird feeling. And seeing that bus with the top ripped off just outside the BMA, so you had all the doctors coming out to try and help injured people. It was absolutely chilling. And it sort of unfolded, Liverpool Street, and no one knew why, what happened there. And first it was thought to be an electrical power.
When it was discovered that they'd done it in the shape of a cruciform, hadn't they? Which was really terrifying, because it meant they'd done that level of planning to make it in the shape of a cross. You know, really,
and
really
the footage
scary.
of the man with the rucksack at King's Cross getting on a train, and who got on. Really,
awful.
Really.
Absolutely awful. Let's get a voice note from Glenn on illegal migrants.
Hi Mike, Glenn from Suffolk here. Well, my alarm's just got off at 5:45, so I'm one of those that Stan was talking about. Went out to work while thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants are in their 4-star hotels, their lovely flats. What are they going to do today? Roam the streets, spend their spending money? Oh, and don't worry about all the people, the millionaires leaving, because I'm sure these illegal immigrants will step up and become millionaires and replace them. Have a good one.
Yeah, like millionaire drug dealers, perhaps, and millionaire, people traffickers and millionaire gangsters. That's what they'll be. This one from Zarina, who said, "Morning, Mike. Really interested to hear your comments about Great Britain and what we used to stand for. I absolutely agree. As I watched the tennis via the TV, I actually felt proud. We need to acknowledge our Britishness more." I think that's a good point. And Sarah from near Plymouth says, "Mike, why not pay a talk researcher to go to France and claim asylum? If the researcher is sent back to Blighty, talk can then pressure the Starmageddon government to do exactly the same with migrants coming here." Yeah, I don't know how easy that would be, because, of course, in France, when you claim asylum, you normally get told no, don't you?
No.
You know, they only give about a third of people. Yeah, they give about a third of the people asylum, whereas we give about 75–80% of them asylum. You know, absolutely mad.
Well, try getting into America without exactly the correct paperwork.
Exactly right. Let's talk a bit about the Green Revolution. There's a couple of stories. One from Ed Miliband, which is quite serious, actually. Apparently heat pumps, and this is not surprising to me, because they don't heat the water up very quickly or very hot. Apparently there's a risk of Legionnaire's disease with heat pumps.
Heat pumps keep water at about 50 degrees to save energy, but Legionella bacteria, and do you remember people get very sick on Legionella?
Especially elderly people.
Yeah, Legionella bacteria thrive between 25 and 45 degrees, and they can survive when systems are not hot enough to kill them off. I don't think, and these are killer germs, I don't think we've actually, and a friend of mine who works in environmental health said this could be the next asbestos. People know about this stuff, and Mad Miliband just presses ahead with it.
Yeah, well, there's not really any kind of, as I've said before, any safeguarding regards to any of this stuff. You know, like when people said that, if you've got a Chinese electric car, if you park it, don't park it anywhere near an MOD building or anywhere near a place, because it can spy on whatever's going on inside.
And batteries blowing up.
And yet they're still allowing people to buy these cars. I mean, if they're that dangerous when it comes to spying, then surely they shouldn't be driving around anywhere in Britain, should they?
Well, I feel similarly about the weight loss jabs. There's a risk with there are links to pancreatitis. And you think, well, why wasn't any of this research done? You can't just introduce this stuff, whether it's heat pumps or solar panels blowing up.
There's the story from the north of England, the Northern Echo here. Shankly Primary School in a place called Cramlington, up in the northeast of England, closed on Monday because the solar panels just burst into flames. And you kind of go, well, how did that happen?
Exactly.
And is it something that can happen quite a lot? Is it something to do with the heat? Is it something to do with dryness? What's it to do with?
Mike, what's going to happen by the end of the week when we're facing, I don't know, 35 I mean, they say it's going to be really, really, really hot by the end. I think we've got the third heat wave coming. I don't know. But are solar panels able to cope with, like, when it goes to 35? In this country, I mean.
Yeah. Well, almost certainly not, because nothing that we've got is any good in any sort of extreme weather. Also, there was a story at the weekend of how the National Grid, which has now been renamed as something else, I can't remember what it is, pays quite often solar farms to switch them off. So that, a bit like when wind farms don't make enough power because it's not windy enough, when it's too sunny, apparently, you have to switch them off. And so they're being paid hundreds of thousands of pounds by the National Grid system just not to be used.
This is what makes me so angry about the net zero agenda, the millions and billions that are being wasted. Not just the endless conferences and the COP and everybody flying around the world and telling us not to fly and all of that, but the billions, the millions. You can get grants for anything as long as it's, comes with a new net zero Project 2030, whatever they're calling it now. GB Energy. Have we ever heard what happened to that bloke?
Well, I mean, they had
Is he still sitting there in his, his empty office where he goes, I'm GB Energy. What are you doing? Who are you?
Jürgen. There's a story about him last week because apparently he's got an office in Manchester where he goes a little bit. He's only been to the office in Aberdeen 4 times, right, in the years since
it's set up.
Well, I don't think there's anybody there. And he basically works from home most of the time.
About 6 months ago, you played this video where he just went, I'm the head of GB Energy. And it's like, what are you actually doing? What is the agenda? How much money have you been given? And offices around the UK. Probably got offices abroad as well.
Yeah, oh, no doubt.
Shocking.
This school in Northumberland, by the way, according to Northumberland County Council, we are seeking structural advice to understand the extent of the damage to Shankly Primary School and what remedial works are needed. This unfortunately means the school will be unable to open on Monday, but they are exploring all options for face-to-face learning as soon as possible. So the school shut down, basically, because the solar panels went on fire. Brilliant.
Mike, if that was me,
Yeah.
you know how angry I get about
Yeah.
the endless school closures. If that was me, I would be taking my child in. I don't care what about your solar panels. You fix it.
And how toxic is the smoke, right? One local who spotted the smoke said, I was out walking my dogs when I saw big black plumes of smoke nearby, and I realised Shankly School was on fire and being attended by several engines from the fire brigade. So, I mean, how damaging is that to the environment?
Absolutely
you know, burning
appalling.
plastic, burning solar panels, black smoke.
Welcome to clean energy.
Yeah, really?
It's crazy.
Doesn't look very clean.
I think we're going to see a lot more of these incidents actually with things like solar panels and heat pumps and things that just haven't been planned for.
Yeah, because
guess what? We've had boilers for decades.
Yeah.
Plumbers know how to fix boilers. They know how to make them safe.
Yeah.
This stuff is just pie in the sky.
Yeah, and it's all from China.
Yeah.
So who knows what's in it, you know? Let's get a voice note from Ian on working people.
Morning, Mike. Ian from Liverpool. Worked till about 1 o'clock this morning. I'm a taxi driver in Liverpool. Up at 5:30 this morning. Took the dog out, like your previous caller said. My partner works 3 jobs. You know, I relatively get by okay. You know, that's we lead a nice life. Don't claim any benefits. I don't blame anyone who does claim benefits. I just think at this moment in time, the people that really need the benefits aren't getting all that they should. All this mental health rubbish, you know, anxiety, which by the way is a normal human emotion. People getting multibility cards, etc., is absolutely disgusting. Anyway, me and the missus, we are off to the Lake District for 3 days for our yearly holiday, leaving at 11 o'clock today. So, love the show. Keep up the good work, Mike. Thank you.
Ian, good for you, and have a lovely time in the Lake District. It can be beautiful, but when it's raining there, I mean, you really know it's raining.
They'll get the nice weather.
Hopefully. It'll be
And
very
that is
nice.
a hard job, you know. Driving taxis is a hard job.
Yeah.
Working till 1 in the morning. His wife's working 3 jobs.
And this is what happens, you know, people, because to get on, you sometimes have to work hard, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with working hard, but it's being discouraged in all sorts of areas, you know. Let's go back to the old GB Energy, shall we? Here's Jürgen on electricity bills.
It will help bring energy prices down.
When?
Well, it's a matter for government and policy to decide.
But as the boss of this, and as someone who is driving forward the ambition of the government, you surely have an idea in your head of when that central pledge to the people of reducing their bills by £300 will come into action.
It is not in the remit of Great British Energy to work out exactly how that energy costing gets through to the consumer.
All night.
Yeah, I mean, he just doesn't look like he knows what he's doing, does he?
No, he looks like he's been out all night. He's in like a really high-end warehouse-designed office, empty office, sitting there saying, I can't tell you when there's going to be £300 off your bills. I don't even know what an energy bill. What is going on? Someone needs to investigate GB Energy properly.
It really is ridiculous. Margaret says from Birmingham, morning, Mike and Emma, Wimbledon has to do a U-turn. Bring back Hawkeye and the line judges. Good luck to Cam Norrie on Tuesday. Keep the Wimbledon traditions. I think she's right. Joe says this morning, Mike, I jumped ship April last year. I went to Thailand for 14 months, now in Vietnam, and then we'll be going back to Thailand, as I am sick of paying out via taxes for everyone else, and I'm getting less and less in return. Plus, as a female, I no longer feel safe in the UK. The country is rotting beyond belief. I hope you read this out as I watch you every day. Joe, of course, my pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for getting in touch. So she's gone
envious.
to Southeast Asia. And there's an awful lot. I mean, I hear of an awful lot of people, kids going down to Thailand for sort of gap years, and a lot of people moving there for business purposes because they just find it a much easier place to live, you know, because it's all about the ease of life at the end of the day. Nobody minds working hard, but if you're working hard and you're getting hammered for tax all the time, and, you know, meanwhile your watches are getting stolen, your car's getting stolen, your house getting broken into, you know, you see people getting free stuff and you have to buy everything. What's going on?
Paying for other people to get all this free stuff, which they clearly don't need. I saw a woman walking past the Hoxton Job Centre, almost running down the street, Mike, holding a crutch, and then she slowed down and walked into the job centre, and I thought, all right, so there's stuff like that where you think, no, that's not on. And it's the struggle. It's a kind of struggle against this tide of kind of, you're wrong. There's so much guilt in terms of living in the UK and just wanting to be left alone and live your life. And then you go abroad and you think, actually, you're not being attacked. You're not being told you're far right. You're not being told that you're kind of deeply bigoted for just wanting to be able to live in a country where you feel comfortable, where your children are safe, We don't have your phone stolen on the streets.
And things are cheaper as
well.
Things
are cheaper.
And that's the other bottom line, isn't it?
What are we paying for in this country?
I know. Well, we're paying for an awful lot of people who don't pay into the system.
But
that's
zero public services as well. I sat with my child, my 4-year-old, 7 hours in A&E. He split his chin open and we needed stitches. I sat there with him for 7 hours.
It's bonkers.
Why?
I know.
I've paid into the NHS for decades. That is absolutely unacceptable. Meanwhile, many, many foreigners were seen before me with their interpreters.
Yeah. I mean, and it's happening. It's not as if you're making this stuff up. This from Phil in Coventry. These tax rises, he says, Mike and Emma, imagine how much tax we would raise if we could tax all the illegal immigrants. Maybe some might leave as a result. Not a bad thought. You know, maybe start taxing them. And if they're working as well illegally, you know, you don't let them use that money to continue to just live high on the hog. You know, you take it off them.
We have no system. We have no record of who's here.
No, we don't even know. It's coming into 10 minutes to 7. It's Morning Glory. It is, of course, a Monday, July the 7th, the anniversary of that dreadful day on 7/7. We'll hear your stories about all of that as we go. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory.
There's going to be one garden tour in Windsor and another one in, I think around somewhere in London. What else? There's going to be a state banquet. We don't yet know whether Catherine's going to be there for the state banquet. They're going to go to number 10 and obviously meet Keir Starmer and have a lunch there. It's a really big 3-day extravaganza. There's going to be a guard of honour. Oh, they're going to go and visit a horse that Macron gave to the late Queen. So they're going to go and have a little visit with him. Camilla's going to be very much on parade. Camilla and Bridget apparently get on really well and have this shared love of literature.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to very nearly 5 or 6 minutes to 7. Goodness gracious me, the hour's nearly gone already. Great show as always. Just a quick thought. If these solar panels are likely to catch fire, is this going to cause a problem with house insurance, says Andy? Could your premiums go up or refusal to get insurance because of that? And that's possible, isn't it? Because people are telling me there's been other incidents like this. Lady Lou, Mike, there was a massive solar farm fire in Norfolk last year, I think. This is not a new thing. And, you know, as you start to look into this, you'll see that there's probably quite a lot of it going on.
And I bet banks would be very, very wary about that. I remember when I was buying my first flat and I tried to buy a flat years ago above a kebab shop, and a mortgage advisor said to me, look, we're never, ever, we really don't want to lend to places above kebab shops, fast food shops, because the risk of fire is so high. But it's probably the similar thing with these heat pumps, exploding heat pumps.
Yeah.
Solar panels.
Well, it will suddenly start to become a problem, no doubt. And Frankie says this, Mike, Starmer cited GB Energy as one of the Labour government's great achievements.
I know.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Harry Cole's written today.
It was listed as one of their big things.
About Labour's future is a crystal balls up is the headline, and it's all about what they've got coming down the line, which is actually worse than everything they've ever dealt with so far.
They've had a bad year, but if you look at the second half of the year, and look, this is meant to be the summer. This is meant to be silly season. Do you remember when it was silly season and people would just kind of write about, I don't know.
Well, do you remember that? I always remember when you think of the last Labour government, when John Prescott was left in charge. I think Blair went on holiday, and he held up. He was at a beach side somewhere. I can't remember. It was in somewhere. I think it might have been in Hull, you know, where he came from. And he had a great big glass jar with a crab in it. And he said, yeah, he said, that's right, I'm the Deputy Prime Minister, so I'm running the country at the moment. I've got this pet crab, he's called Peter. He was just taking the mickey out of Peter Mandelson. Just very funny. And that was kind of, you know, because they knew how to do it, regardless of whether you like Tony Blair or not, and most people don't. They had a proper way of governing.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
They were competent. This lot are completely incompetent.
And it honestly feels like everything's being made up.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing
I
about...
saw Bridget Phillipson on TV yesterday claiming that, you know, it's not true to say that there's more, you know, private schools shutting down. She was like, oh, no, there's more of them opening up. And then when she was asked, well, where? She went, I'd have to look at the detail. I haven't got the detail for you here. And I mean, so disingenuous.
It really is, and they don't know what they're doing. And this new thing about, maybe we'll do a wealth tax. You know, it's sort of being made up on the. But there's a line in the Times. You know this thing about the fresh revolt on special needs.
Yeah.
There's a line in the Times that a senior Labour source says, if they thought taking money away from disabled adults was bad, watch what happens when they try the same with disabled kids.
Yeah.
And I just think it's things like that, because I know a lot of parents who are trying to get these EHCPs, and people will fight for their children, for their disabled children, for their special needs children, and they are alienating. Then on the front of the Express, you've got OAPs possibly being hit by their full state pension being hit by tax, and it's kind of like, how can Labour limp on when they are alienating?
A lot of the unions are now against them as well. I mean, the unions, of course, are very much in favour of the wealth tax, but the doctors' unions are looking at striking. 29% pay rise is what they want. Stoppages...
29%.
29%. This is on top of the 22% they got last year when Labour got in.
Within weeks of coming in.
So these are now warnings that stoppages could lead to hundreds of thousands of appointments and operations being cancelled.
Yes.
And you know, one of the reasons that Labour keep banging on about how they've got the waiting list down a little bit.
Such lies.
It's still 7.6 million, and they're only down because they're comparing it to when the last strike was on last summer. So when they compare it to last year, they're comparing it to when basically the NHS wasn't working.
It's so dishonest, and also the way they move people around, the way they move them from one list to another, the way they offer them an appointment, and, you know, I mean, the whole thing about waiting lists being down is...
Because if you remember, this is what we're dealing with between March and July. From March 23 and July 24, junior doctors were on strike for a total of 44 days during that period.
Yeah.
You know, no wonder the NHS is failing.
No, well, it's absolutely failing. As my experience at A&E with a small child is a really good reminder that it's completely failing. But also, when you get those strikes again, that's when people start to get really angry, because that affects everybody. That isn't just the pensioners or the people with disabled children.
No, it is absolutely not. Strange story. I'm going to just touch on it.
He really needs to get a grip. Starmer needs to get a grip.
Yeah. Final story, because we've only got a couple of minutes left. On page 5 of the Daily Mail, this was an Observer thing from yesterday. They did the whole front page of the Observer on this weird story.
That was weird. What was that front page?
Well, I mean, it was some idiot thinking it's time to change the way we do journalism.
Yeah.
A bloke called James Harding, he used to be in the Conservative government, is now runs Tortoise, so he's now the kind of, you know, the overall editor-in-chief of the Observer. He'll make a complete dog's breakfast of it. But this book called The Salt Path, which is apparently heralded by all sorts of middle-class people, is this is marvellous. I was reading, funnily enough, Mumsnet yesterday.
What were you doing on that?
Only because I was led there by some comments underneath the piece. And it was all women going, oh man, I thought this was such a great book. Now it turns out to be complete rubbish. I don't know what to do. And they're all sort of beside themselves with horror, you know, because it was all wrong. And they've just put out a movie with Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs.
Yeah, it's because it's been made into a movie.
And the book is now, it turns out, a complete farrago of nonsense.
So Moth and Wynne, which weren't their names, Moth and Wynne, they claim that they lost their property in Wales. I haven't read this book. Lost their property in Wales, and then they went on this massive odyssey walking down the Wales Park.
Actually,
the property was repossessed because the author allegedly stole thousands of pounds from a former employee or employer.
Just bizarre. But how the middle class live, that's all I can say. Emma, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back with loads more. This is, of course, Morning glory. We have loads and loads of stories to do today, and we want your stories as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number. The 44,359, the migrant tracker. See you after this.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Although I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists. There is just so many to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question to I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, there's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. We've got some great stuff coming up in this. Sarah Poching joins us, Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby. She's been having meetings up in the northwest with Cheshire Police and Crime Commissioner Dan Price. She's going to have some interesting things to say about crime and punishment up there and how they're going to be dealing with it in the police. The front page of the Mail today says top police chiefs say smell of cannabis is a sign of crime. Senior officers tell the Daily Mail that the drug stench can make even them feel unsafe and frontline officers should do something about it. Really? What, you think you have to issue an edict to tell people to arrest people for smoking illegal substances and walking around with them and carrying them and selling them and buying them? How is that just not an illegal thing anyway? 0344 499 1000. We've got front page of the Telegraph saying that Labour are now looking at a wealth tax because, of course, they think that will be the answer to the various black holes that they've created ever since they've been in power. For heaven's sake, I've never seen anything like the amount of money that is going south. We've got a great column by Harry Cole. We'll be talking to him later on in the show, in which it shows exactly just how many millionaires are leaving this country. And it is thousands and thousands of them. I have to tell you that. 9.8 thousand have gone to the UAE, 7.5 thousand have gone to the United States, 3.6 thousand have gone to Italy, 3,000 have gone to Switzerland, 2.4 thousand have gone to Saudi Arabia, 1.6 thousand to Singapore, 1.4 thousand to Portugal. The list goes on and on and on. and if you look at the way that tax burden works in this country, something like the top 25% of people pay 75% of the tax. So once you start losing the people who make the money for the government doesn't have any money. And that is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Keir Starmer faces yet another fight on the backbenches because there's another battle looming over special needs provision. Downing Street, according to the front page of The Guardian, they've seen a letter signed by dozens of special needs and disability charities and campaigners, including the president of the National Autistic Society, says parents fear the plans are going to restrict or abolish education, health and care plans, the EHCPs, that more than 600,000 children and young people rely on for individual support. Starmer's going to try and kill them off. He's going to try and take money away from disabled children next. I mean, whatever is happening to this country. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Will Kingston is going to join us coming up very shortly. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome back to Morning Glory. This is, of course, the one place where you get the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. One here from Dave, who says, morning, Mike, could you please get Jürgen on your show and ask him where in Aberdeen the office is? I live here and I've never seen it, and nor has anyone I know. That's James in Aberdeen. Thank you, James in Aberdeen. I will try and get Jürgen on the show. We really should try and do that. I suspect he may not be that keen. Morning, Mike, says Peter, Phil from Hertfordshire, rather. I'm an engineer on a little bit about the heat pumps. I know a little bit about the heat pumps. The storage tank will have an emergency heater, electric immersion heater, which is normally programmed to switch on and bring the temperature up to 60 periodically to kill any Legionella. So that's how they get around it. Well, yeah, well, they might get around it, but they're not getting around it if people are getting Legionnaire's disease, and if there's a risk of getting that, you know, they wouldn't be able to do that in any other realm of the business, apart from because it's environmentally sound and it's green. Unbelievable stuff. Should we have a voice note from Adrian?
Great show, and really enjoyed the summary of this useless government, its first year. Just made me realise even more, though, we need rid of these people before they destroy the country completely. When is King Charles going to exercise his legal power to dissolve this failing, lying Parliament? I believe William IV did it in 1834, and put in Robert Peel. Did a damn good job for a while. Certainly set up the police force. Anyway, great show, and we keep our fingers crossed that the King is going to step up to the plate and actually do something really useful.
Well, that would be handy if the King would do something really useful, but unfortunately his marking of the 7/7 anniversary does not exactly fill me with joy, because unfortunately, you know, he seems to be more concentrated on making sure that we are less divided as a nation together. He says that he's going to make a statement before today's memorial service for the victims. The King has issued his heartfelt thoughts and special prayers to all those whose lives were forever changed on that terrible day. But then he goes on about the spirit of unity that has helped London and events that rally communities together in solidarity, solace and determination, and talk of, you know, not allowing things to divide us. Well, unfortunately, when people get blown up, they tend to get a bit hate-filled about the people that blew them up, is what I've found. Let's talk to Will Kingston, political commentator, host of the Fire at Will podcast. Will, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Yes, sadly, I think that the King shares a lot of the Sadiq Khan-style progressive woke views, but he's just slightly more limited in what he can actually say. But there's that sympathy there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think there is. And I mean, sometimes, you know, they just miss the point slightly, you know, and I get that there are things that he needs to sound off about, but he's also in a very powerful position. And even just one or two sentences about, you know, how dangerous it is to encourage extremism, or how dangerous it is to allow people into this country who may wish to do us harm. You know, it wouldn't go amiss if he said something like that, and it wouldn't be in any way the wrong thing to say, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of these leaders, you know, I include the King, I include most politicians, they still think they're living in the 80s or 90s where this sort of spin works, where you can say particular types of words and people don't think critically about it. Whereas now when someone hears a line like that, they go, well, why aren't you actually getting to the real issue?
Yes.
People are much more discerning. They can cut through the BS in the modern media environment in a way that they didn't used to be able to.
Yeah, I think partly because there's a lot of different types of commentary now going on, you know, not least there's channels like ours, there's people on social media, you know, who are very powerful, who've got big followings, and who people just, you know, people don't watch what you might call traditional mainstream programs anymore. They just don't. And so they're not buying into it, you know. And when you see some of the nonsense that's parroted by some of the sort of the big news shows, you just think, you know, that is absolutely not what is going on. That is absolutely not what people think. You know, when you see some of the interviews that take place, and you go, you know, the interviewers are kind of gobsmacked by what they see and what they hear, and you just kind of go. I mean, I was listening to somebody the other day on a rival channel who was describing somebody shoplifting, and said, oh yeah, I saw this very unfortunate young slim man who didn't look terribly healthy running in at speed to a Sainsbury's and stealing a load of baby formula and running out again, and said, you know, obviously he needed it for his family. And somebody rang in and went, actually no, baby formula is really, really valuable because it's very expensive, so a lot of people nick it and sell it to buy drugs, because, you know, a lot of ordinary people can't afford it. It's 15, 20 pounds a bottle. And this person was like, the person whose show it was like completely gobsmacked that was the reality, because, you know, she was under the impression that this poor guy was stealing because he had a baby, and it never occurred to her that he might be a junkie, even though he obviously looked like one.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It just goes to show as well, there is still, despite what we just said around the fragmentation of media, a mainstream media class that is predominantly that liberal elite that lives in kind of parts of Islington or has a lot of money from family, which means that they can afford to do, you know, sorts of particular types of media jobs. Yeah. And they don't actually bother to go out and see the rest of the UK. So there is still that disconnect as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's have a look at what the Tories have been saying. I mean, they've got nothing really to shout about at the moment, but they did do a video at the weekend, which at least cheered me up. And this is their celebration of 1 year of this Labour government.
Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain with wealth created in every community.
I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. This budget raises taxes by £40 billion.
Inflation jumps more than forecast to its highest rate in over a year, prompting investors to bet against more rate cuts from the Bank of England.
Secure borders.
The number of migrants crossing the Channel to the UK in small boats in the first half of this year has risen by more than 40% compared with the same period last year.
Safer streets.
Today in England and Wales, more than 1,000 prisoners are expected to be released under the UK government's early release scheme, having served only 40% of their sentences.
Our work is urgent and we begin it today. Thank you very much.
Have you lost control of your MPs, Prime Minister?
That's because he stumbled as he came out of Parliament number 10 on Wednesday. And that other clip from, you know, our work is urgent and we start today, that was day one, right? When he looked about 30 years younger than he does now. And
really does, doesn't he?
And none of that included, I mean, also David Lammy, who we've been watching this morning as well, telling us all how he's done such a great job this year. Got this from Susan, who says, morning, Mike, great show as usual. I read that David Lammy visited Syria to re-establish ties, and the UK government giving them $94.5 million. You couldn't make it up. That's another one of his greatest hits. You know, he's suddenly meeting up with a bloke, and I know Donald Trump did it as well. But we're meeting up with this guy from Syria, who's the former leader of an Al-Qaeda based organisation, which is now becoming more and more Islamic as time goes on. You know, they got rid of Bashar al-Assad, and now they've got this kind of formerly bloodthirsty terrorist in charge. Oh, and guess what they're doing now? They're clamping down on women walking around without hijabs on. They're making it more and more difficult for people to behave in a way which is, in their words, un-Islamic. And suddenly we're giving them nearly 100 million quid.
Yeah, well, somehow the Labor Party and the left in this country still see that Islamic voting base as an oppressed class, and so they give them a pass. On that ad, I think it's really interesting, Mike, because I don't think the Conservatives have woken up to the new reality that they find themselves in, with a party that is outflanking them on the right, as well as having to attack the incumbent government on the left. Like, that could just as easily be an ad for reform, and most people would read it as an ad for reform, because most of those problems that were in that ad people equate them with the Conservatives just as much as they equate them with the Labor Party. So the thing which the Conservatives have to deal with incredibly quickly, and it'll have to be a lot quicker than Kemi Badenoch saying, I'm taking my time, I'm going to do things in a measured, considered way, because frankly for her, she doesn't have the time to do that anymore.
Right.
They've got to say, not just this Labor government is rubbish, fine, we know that. They've got to say, well, why should we give you guys another chance when you were such a big part of the problem in the first place?
Yeah.
And they still haven't been able to work out a lane to be able to say that. And that's why I think the conversation around the Conservatives being at existential risk in this country is very, very real.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation with several Tory MPs, and I ask them that question whenever they come on, usually now. Mel Stride was doing the rounds yesterday, and he was talking about how, you know, we're having to rebuild, we understand that we got it wrong, we made mistakes, blah, blah, blah. That's all fine. But every time there's a new poll, the Tories seem to be further and further away, you know, from reality. There's one out that came out yesterday, sort of overnight, Times Online. It's another one from the More in Common people, and it's got the Reform Party with 290 seats, Labour 126, Conservatives 81, Lib Dem 73. I mean, it's really, really damaging for the Tories. It looks as though they are, you know, lucky if they can come in third.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think there is a lane for them in modern British politics, and it is around fiscal responsibility. So you mentioning the wealth tax before, it's very obvious that this government doesn't have the ability to be able to be fiscally responsible, to cut down on spending, which is what we need to do. It certainly doesn't have the ability to be able to grow the economy, which not so long ago was the raison d'etre of this government.
Yeah.
So they're just going to keep raising taxes. That's the only other lever they've got. And by the way, they've run out of road there. You cannot keep raising taxes and expect to keep getting the same amount of tax revenue in return.
Well, it doesn't work like that, does it? It just simply doesn't work like that. And as we've seen from this this poll that's been done by Visual Capitalist in association with Henley and Partners, which is a very good polling company, and Harry Cole's tweeted this out already. You know, thousands and thousands of people are simply picking up and leaving the UK. You know, and you can't disavow that and say it doesn't matter, because it's a huge amount of tax revenue that's disappearing with them.
Yeah, the extraordinary thing is, given that Labor has so much sympathy for the luxury beliefs of the liberal elite class, they fail to understand two really critical things about rich people, which is A, they've got very good accountants, and B, that they can move around if the circumstances that they're in change. They've got the ability to do so. It's the working class, it's the poor people, and it's even kind of the up to the middle class that have less flexibility. So they just go, oh, well, you know, I'm sure that the rich will suck it up, as opposed to actually being smart with their money.
Yeah.
But the one other thing I'd say on that Conservative dilemma is that I don't think reforms so far have shown enough of an appetite to actually have any sort of fiscally responsible approach to some of these problems. I think some of their economics sounds pretty populist as opposed to actually being responsible in the way we need it to be. So the angle, the angle for the Conservatives is obviously we are the fiscally responsible party in a time when the UK economy is rapidly heading towards the cliff, and I don't think that's overstating it. But the problem with that, Mike, is in an age in Western politics where, to be honest, most people are just happy to see more money go on the country credit card.
Right.
You need to have incredibly persuasive, good politicians who can tell in simple terms why it is important to save money, why tough choices need to be made, and as a result of that, why even when there's going to be losers in the economy, it's best for people overall if you make those hard choices. But I can't see enough of that type of talent in the Conservative Party to make that argument.
The problem is that the Tories' argument about fiscal responsibility will always fall down because they were the ones that brought us here in the first place. You know, we had much higher taxes under the Tories than we'd ever had before since the Second World War. They were the ones that brought those taxes in. They say it was because of austerity. They say it was because of the fact that COVID happened. You know, all well and good. But, you know, unfortunately, also under them, the state got bigger. You know, there were more civil servants hired. They're still there. Nobody's got rid of them. You know, whenever they talk about, you know, we're having to make tough choices, we're going to have to save money. We'll sack some of the people in the civil service, reduce the size of the state. That's what real people want in this country. They don't want money spent on all sorts of civil servants and people who've got jobs for life, who sit around doing it from home. That's not any longer going to be acceptable to anyone. And that's why I think Reform have got that, you know, that system. You know, you might not think it's as believable as it should be, but, you know, they've got the right idea. They want to reduce the size of the state. They don't want to keep increasing it and then cutting benefits.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. That makes entire sense. This is the Gordian knot for the Conservatives, and I think they're just hoping their strategy is, well, give it enough time and people will forget about that 14-year period, and I'm not sure that that's going to be successful for them. They need to do something radical to reframe their brand, whether that is openly coming out and just laying into Johnson, Cameron, that whole 14-year period, and say these guys were useless, we disavow them from the Conservative Party, they weren't Conservatives. Whether it's a full-on rebrand in some way, they need to do something to break that chain, because at the moment people can say you guys are just as bad or you guys started the problems. And I don't think just say, okay, well, in 3 years' time people will have forgotten about that period is sufficient. I don't think it's a good enough strategy for them.
No, I don't think it is. Good to talk to you. Will Kingston, thanks very much indeed. Political commentator and host of the Fire at Will podcast. The new poll puts reform on 290 seats in Parliament, which pretty much would be enough to make Nigel Farage the Prime Minister. Let's get a voice note from Ben.
Morning, Mike and the team. Ben from Essex, up at 5, driving into London to complete my day's work. My wife and I have never been out of work. We've always managed to find a job wherever we can. We've both been in employment with our companies for quite a while now as well. Just can't deal with the hypocrisy from the government anymore, telling us what we can and can't do, and taking everything that British people have put into this country and giving it to people that don't belong here. And as far as talking about the 7/7 attacks that happened 20 years ago today, and talking about the division that it brings, let's start looking at the people that cause these attacks all over the country and why we're inviting them into our Western civilizations where their culture, it just doesn't fit. Keep up the good work. As much as I love listening to the show, it can be frightfully frustrating at times, but it's always good to have people talking common sense.
Ben, thank you. We are the home of common sense, obviously, and yeah, I know it's frustrating. I know it can be irritating, but you know, sometimes we need to get these things out in the open, and then you know, given them the glare of sunlight and the light that we can shine on them, then we can somehow find a solution to them, I think, for sure, no question at all. Coming up later on in the show, we're going to talk about what's going on inside your local GP's office. Harry Cole is going to be here. He's written a big piece today in The Sun, as per usual, on a Monday, all about how Labour's future is a load of crystal balls. It's a great cartoon of him, actually, looking a bit like a sort of mystical figure. Robert Bates coming next, though, to talk to us about what's going on with migration in this country, because it's basically now completely and utterly out of hand. It's got free-for-all, people coming from France whenever they like, by whatever means they like. We had a caller, I think, on Friday from Cambridge telling us, a long-distance lorry driver, he just pulled up into a service stop and watched 4 illegal migrants jumping out of the back of a lorry in front of him. There's a lot more of that going on than we even know about. 0344 499 1000 is the number, 722.
I mean, if Angela Rayner becomes Prime Minister of this country, she's obsessed with this Islamophobia law, I'm out. I'm gone.
Yeah, well, you've got plenty of places you can move to.
She is not only thick, she's dangerously thick. and massively ideological. And
she's also quite a clever politician, though.
Be.
No, but she's also quite a clever politician, and she's certainly
she's ruthless.
She's clever enough to run rings around the entire Labour Party.
Yeah,
she would definitely get in there.
She's well savvy. Oh, Limonek.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 7:25 coming up to 7:30, very nearly. We're here, of course, until 10 o'clock. There's a podcast that comes out every single weekday morning. Just after that, let's get a voice note from Michael.
Hello, Mike. It's Michael from the Dustbin of the World, Norwich. Listen to this. I met a Sikh man over the weekend who has been here 2 years. He's studying, or did come here to study, brought his wife, brought his 3 children. He's now a taxi driver, and he drives children from Thetford in Norfolk to Great Yarmouth in Norfolk. Nigerian children, he told me. 1 per car. And it's costing £80 there and £80 back, £160 a day per child to go to a special needs school, Thetford to Great Yarmouth, every single day, costing the council taxpayer £160 per Nigerian child. What a country.
Incredible, isn't it? And this is going on every single place you go. I mean, I remember all the way back to when I started out in radio up in Edinburgh at Talk 107, and we discovered that Edinburgh Council was paying something like £3 million a year to taxi companies to take special needs kids to school. £3 million a year. And that was before probably that much of an influx of people perhaps from other countries abroad. It was just kids that were playing truant, kids that they had to make sure that they got to school because their parents weren't going to take them, kids who would probably rather not go to school, kids who would avoid going to school, kids who would go anywhere other than school, so they had to pick them up at their home and take them in a taxi to their school. It wasn't necessarily a long distance. Some of them were. I think we found some that went from Edinburgh to Fife across the Forth Bridge and all of that. But at the end of the day, you know, just a staggering number of kids being taken to school in taxis, and it goes on in every single council in the land. And it is an absolute and utter scandal, and we'll do more on that as well. Let's talk to Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Good to see you. This is another story that I wasn't necessarily going to talk to you about, but we might as well do it. Who knows how much of this is going on, and I don't know how it would be terribly easy to measure, because you'd probably have to go to each individual council to say to them, you know, how many people are you taking to schools, and which places, which nationalities are they? You know, are they asylum seekers? You know, there could be all of that going on.
Yeah, it's something that was brought to my attention last week, actually, and we're looking to put in some FOIs on it. We've had one instance raised with us where it looks like an individual might actually be being paid to take his own kid to school in the back of a taxi. So that's something we're looking to... You know, it's an absolutely ridiculous situation across the country. Millions is being wasted on this scheme. So, yeah we're looking at.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? But I mean, you know, we can talk about all manner of stories this morning. The Mail's got one which says Starmer's going to be humiliated because his new idea of doing the one-in, one-out nonsense, which was nonsense anyway, is going to be scuppered by the European Union. But The Sun also today with a big spread basically saying it's now such a free-for-all in France that, you know, there's so many people coming that they can't actually keep up with the numbers.
Yeah, and this is exactly what you and I and people like us on our side of the argument have been trying to point out to Keir Starmer, is that the problem isn't actually the people smugglers. The problem is the sheer demand that is emerging across Europe to come to the UK. We are the land of milk and honey. We are seen as such a soft touch. And you see other stories that have come out in recent days, such as us extending legal aid to those that are claiming asylum, making it easier for them to bung up the system and to try and resist any deportation that's imposed upon them. This is a system that is not like anything in Europe. It's a system that has effectively been hijacked by left-wing activists to make life as easy as possible for illegal migrants, and the beneficiaries of that are those that are running the smuggling gangs. And it's something that I really can't see how Keir Starmer can continue with these ridiculous schemes of one in, one out that he's raising, this idea of smashing the gangs, which has resulted in absolutely nothing, because the British public have had an absolute enough of this. You know, the numbers that have arrived this year alone are 50% up on where they were last year. We're looking like we're going to hit 50,000 this year. £6.4 billion every single year now going on this absolutely ridiculous situation. Starmer needs to realise that he has to about turn again on this one and actually put in place a deterrent.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers here just from last week, nearly 4 times as many small boat migrants have made it to Britain in 1 week than the French managed to stop. A total of 703 crossed the Channel in the 7 days to June the 29th, while the French cops stopped just 191. And this is as we get the sort of the migrant tracker that we've got, getting us up to not far off 45,000. But of course, I was just mentioning there that we had a call to the show on Friday from a long-distance lorry driver up in Cambridge somewhere, who said he'd just seen 4 guys jump out the back of a lorry in front of him when he pulled into a service stop. So that's still going on as well.
And that's absolutely right. And it's especially interesting to watch what's happened to those Albanians that are looking to come into the country illegally. Of course, the Tories signed a deal with Albania to return Albanian nationals caught on the small boats. But you actually see an increase now in them appearing in the back of lorries and those kind of, as you were, more old-fashioned routes through which to arrive into the country illegally. Of course, it's important to recognise that this isn't a crisis that's purely on the Channel. We also have a huge crisis with people overstaying visas and simply disappearing into the country, as well. There was a piece a couple of days ago that, you know, we are probably seeing every year thousands, tens of thousands of individuals arriving on tourist study work visas and then just not leaving at the end of their allocated period.
Yeah, just disappearing into the sort of the undergrowth, as it were, which is what an awful lot of people do. And then just to show how mad the government's view on all of this is, it turns out that Yvette Cooper's going to change the law to make it illegal to glorify channel crossing. So apparently if you make a film of the channel crossing that you're making, or if you put out any kind of, you know, social media activity around the practice of smuggling yourself into Britain, that's illegal, but actually arriving here illegally isn't illegal.
It's ridiculous. Again, I don't know how these things actually are enforced. I don't know what the plan is. You know, if they were able to get one individual under this proposed law, they would make such a song and dance about it and act like they put the whole edifice to a collapse. It's another gimmick that, frankly, we've had enough of now at this point. There was another one, of course, where they were looking to clamp down on Facebook pages and TikTok videos. They've not done that either. So it's effectively a system that they don't know what they're doing, and they're trying to put out these little sound bites.
Exactly right. And meanwhile, we've got Emmanuel Macron turning up this week for a state visit, which will no doubt have some form of conversation about the illegal crossings. But, you know, the French don't want to stop them. We can't make them.
No, I've always been saying on this that there is no point trying to pin all our hopes on France sorting this out for us. They have no interest in doing so. And the one in, one out scheme that was proposed with France, it now looks like it is going to fall a cropper, because you've got those countries in Europe that are on the borders of Europe where the migrant crisis is most acute in Europe, kicking up a fuss saying it will cause them more damage. Now, it remains to be seen whether this is just a negotiating ploy to actually get our politicians and civil servants dragged into a whole Europe-wide asylum scheme, which is my very real concern that I think when we start talking with Europe, we know how our politicians get outfoxed by them. We saw that during Brexit. And the risk is that we end up taking far more from Europe than we actually end up returning to them in the first place. We need to be very careful when we think that France are the silver bullet here.
Yeah, exactly right. Because, again, you know, we are the end point of where people come to, because they get to the point where, having gone through Europe and there are various different countries there, they realise that the best place for them is Britain, because this is where they get the best treated.
Well, exactly, and of course you see time and again those individuals that have jumped through several countries and tried asylum in several countries. We are the last resort, but the way we deter those individuals from even attempting it is through a third country deportation scheme, or reasserting our ability to remove those individuals to their country of origin, which we don't have anywhere near enough removal agreements with those countries of origin. In Afghanistan, for instance, we have no means to legal means to actually return individuals. That's why we see grant rates for Afghanis so high when they come into the country illegally. And then we need to get back to a system like Rwanda, where someone has thrown their documents overseas, over the side of the boat, which they seem to be very fond of doing. Then we can return them to another country and process their asylum applications way away from the British mainland.
Right, well, that would be ideal. But, of course, you know, the Labour government now are looking for a sort of Rwanda replacement scheme, aren't they? And they're looking at all sorts of other countries as third countries to process people, as if they might as well have just kept Rwanda as an idea.
Yeah, my understanding of what Labour are looking at, though, is it's a sort of processing centre, and then if an individual is successful, they would have they would be able to claim asylum in the UK. The difference with the Rwanda scheme was it basically recognised that if you've come into the country illegally, you have no right ever to have asylum in the UK. I think that's a very important principle that needs to be put back at the heart of our asylum system, because at the moment it's being completely taken advantage of. It's not in any way fit for purpose. It's not how it was probably imagined in the aftermath of the Second World War. It would be a humane asylum system would operate. It's effectively a means through which economic migrants are able to come into Britain and make a comfortable life for themselves at the British taxpayers' expense.
Yeah, exactly right. Robert, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Robert Bates there, Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control. Coming up, we're going to go to the United States and see what's going on in that part of the world. There have been some terrible floods in Texas. The search continues for 10 missing girls, but there's an awful lot of children who are believed to have died, of course, as well. We'll talk to Charles Feldman about that. Is it Happy Rwanda Day today, says Ian. 1 year on, smash the gangs, working a real treat, isn't it? Yeah, not exactly. Filling commentary, this speech by the King regarding 7/7, I think you'll find that when he's on about division, he's on about us, the British people. He'll think we're the problem. We're all racist for wanting safe streets for our own people. And I think he gets that wrong quite often. Mike, in the Netflix 7/7 documentary, the people being interviewed were more concerned with how the attack made Muslims look rather than how it changed the victims' lives, says Michelle. Well, again, that's part of the problem, isn't it? The way that people actually try to react to these things. And Anna in Surrey with an interesting piece of information. Baby formula is used to cut drugs, she says, to make them more appealing so dealers can charge more. Well, I guess it bulks them out. And if that's what it's being used for, well, that would explain why somebody who looks a bit like a junkie is stealing it, as opposed to actually trying to help his baby, which is what all these lefty do-gooders think must be the case, because they can't believe that anyone is actually doing anything bad, especially if they're, you know, looking a bit like they might be underprivileged. Unbelievable. 7:35.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:37. Eagle-eyed Teresa has sent me this. She says, Mike, I too enjoyed the tennis on Saturday, albeit from the comfort of my sofa. And there you were, resplendent in a pink shirt. Djokovic was smashing it. Best regards. Yeah, Teresa, thank you very much indeed. It was an incredible day. Absolutely right. Zarina says this, on Division, I live in a sleepy market town akin to a large village surrounded by fields. As I'm getting ready for my working day, I've looked out of my tiny cottage window to see a woman walking towards my house fully veiled. How on earth does she think she's going to integrate into the community, which incidentally is full of retirees? And Mike from Tony in Barrow-in-Furness, if AI failed 3 times at Wimbledon, how will Starmer's AI doctors get on with tens of thousands of ill people? Well, that's a very good question. Yeah, the line judges were done away with, and so, as it turned out, was the AI automatic machine. So it was all a bit of a disaster, I'm afraid. We'll come back to that coming up a bit later on in the show. Right now, that's 7:38. Charles Feldman's here, US political analyst. Charles, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. A terrible tragedy in Texas. The death toll from flash flooding reached 70 last night, I'm told. I don't know if it's gone up any further. 21 children included as well. It seems as though there was a Christian camp overwhelmed when the River Guadalupe burst its banks on Friday. Sounds horrendous.
Yeah, well, it is horrendous. You know, this is a part of Texas, central part of the state, that is prone to flooding, but no one was expecting the flooding to be nearly as bad as it turned out to be, because nobody, including the National Weather Service, was anticipating the amount of rainfall that they had in a very short period of time. And that camp that you were speaking about, this is a camp that I think was about to celebrate its I think it was a 100th anniversary. It's been for quite some time, and it's a very favorite place for people who live in that neck of the woods to send their young girls for summer camp. So this is a double tragedy, the tragedy for the people, of course, who died, who were not attending the camp, but also for those children who were killed. And there are several, almost, I think, a little bit, almost 24 at this point, that are still missing.
Right. It is shocking. It says the river which runs alongside the camp, Camp Mystic, I think it's called, rose from 7 feet to 29 feet. I mean, that's prodigious, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you know, they had, I mentioned the amount of rainfall. They had rainfall in a period of a couple of hours that they would typically expect this time of year to happen over a period of perhaps an entire month. So when you have that amount of rain falling, you are going to have the kind of situation, the kind of flooding that you had. There are also some questions, I should tell you, Mike, being raised about whether there was adequate warning to the people in the area about the impending amount of rain. Apparently also, not too long ago, there was an effort on the part of officials to get the community to be supportive of a better early warning system, the kind of system that many states here have for tornadoes. But apparently the community turned it down for cost.
Right, and that's always a problem, isn't it? The cost of these things. And Donald Trump yesterday signed a major disaster declaration, which means there will be further emergency funds. In these cases, it's always usually the president that makes a visit. I mean, I always go back to Hurricane Katrina back in the day when I think it was George W. Bush was kind of castigated for not going and looking at it soon enough.
Right, and Mr. Trump says he is planning on going, but perhaps toward the end of the week. He says he didn't want to interfere with the search and rescue mission, and that actually does make a lot of sense. When presidents roll into any town, the focus of attention, the focus of all officials is on the president of the United States, and this is probably not the best time to shift the focus.
No, I think I'd probably agree with that. Meanwhile, Elon Musk seems to have decided to form his own political party. What's that all about?
Yeah, it has. Well, I mean, the fallout, you know, the sort of bromance between Musk and Trump, you know, it's had, as you know, its ups and downs, and it looked like it was mended, but not now. You know, Musk is still very angry about the bill that President Trump signed on the 4th of July. Musk thinks that it's wasteful. He thinks it's going to be a problem for future generations. Trump thinks that Musk is mad because it's a problem for him, because it eliminates an incentive for people to buy electric vehicles. So what Musk has done is, yes, he's formed, I think it's called the America. party. And the main purpose of the party, I mean, I don't think that Musk intends to run for anything. The main purpose of the party is to funnel money into it because Musk says, that he's going to use that money to challenge Republican senators who voted in favor of Mr. Trump's bill when it comes time for the midterm elections.
Yes, and I mean, I've only ever seen occasional presidential contests which tend to involve an independent, and it never really goes particularly well, even if the independent is quite, interesting and has got a reasonable amount of a following. I mean, there's no real system that can allow for a third party to do any good there, is there?
No, you're right. I mean, the U.S. Constitution actually doesn't even talk about political parties. That was something that evolved a few years after the country was founded. And you're quite right that for the most part, this is a two-party country, and there are some splinter parties and third parties that come along. What they do tend to do, though, and they've done this a few times in recent presidential elections, is they can sometimes, in certain states, tip the balance, because if you siphon off enough votes from the mainstream parties, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, it could, in a particular state, excuse me, for presidential elections, tilt an election one way or the other. That's where they serve a sort of purpose.
So we'll see. We'll keep our eyes on that. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, is coming to the White House today.
Yes, and it is expected that the two of them, Mr. Trump and Mr. Netanyahu, are going to announce a 60-day ceasefire. But look, you and I, we've discussed this in the past. I've lost count of how many times there were announcements of ceasefires, 30-day ceasefires, 15-day ceasefires, 60-day ceasefires. This one is supposed to be a 60-day ceasefire where Hamas is supposed to be releasing, I think it is 10 more living hostages, and I believe the figure is, the last one I saw, about 18 dead hostages. The Israelis would be releasing Palestinian prisoners. The Israelis would, according to various reports, withdraw their troops to a buffer zone along Gaza's borders with Egypt and with Jordan. Much more than that really has not been widely reported. One thing that has been reported is that Mr. Trump apparently has insisted that he be the one to announce it.
Yes, we'll keep an eye on that and see how it plays out. Charles Feldman, thank you very much indeed, US political analyst. This from Alan in Merseyside. Mike, tell me why are we giving Macron a state visit? Why can't he just jump in a dinghy like everyone else does and shake hands with Starmer, then deport himself back to France? Well, I don't know. And Ashley says, Mike, you've said about the smell of weed and having no money left in this country. Surely making it legal will only boost everything, as I'm sure there is millions to be made here. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't know that any part of America has benefited, particularly financially, from putting a tax on marijuana. It hasn't really worked. Because they're not, they say that they can raise money and they can put it directly into schools, but, the knock-on effects of it are probably worse than the effects of making the money. Let's get a voice note from Karen on tax.
Hi, Mike. I totally agree with Will Kingston, but I don't think what people realise is this country's bankrupt. It's been bankrupt for many years, and we're never going to be paying back that debt. So this is why we're getting all these tax rises on everybody, and they're going to keep doing it until they tax us into oblivion. And then what happens when they run out of money? Because there's not enough people working for them to tax, and the ones that are working in the end will have nothing in their pocket. So what will happen? I might as well give up work. No point in working if this keeps happening. And watching all the migrants come in, all the money. But there is another side issue here that no one's talking about. Why the hell did David Lammy give 94 million to the Syrian leader, who is a terrorist? He might be standing there in a suit, but he's a terrorist. And that's another thing that people are not talking about.
Yeah, we did mention it a bit earlier, Karen. Thank you for bringing it up again. Because one of the things that they're talking about with Syria, and of course Lammy's saying, I quite like your reference to him as Lamy, you might have to use that. he's saying that, well, of course, you know, we need to reach out to these people and make sure that they still have inclusive government because, of course, they've got many, many different factions in Syria, including Druze, including Christians, many of whom are being killed by this new operation that's running the Syrian government, which appears to be becoming more and more hard line with every passing day. But of course, one of the things that they have there in Syria are refugee camps full of people like Shamima Begum. And so an awful lot of British people who went out to fight on behalf of ISIS are still in those refugee camps, and a decision has to be made about whether they're brought back here. My personal belief is we shouldn't bother. We should let them die there. But, you know, some people will have a different view. 0344 499 1000. One from Sonia, or Kitty from Kent here, rather. I went to see Tom Jones last night in the soaked standing crowd. The continual stink of weed kept floating over, as well as vapes and general cigarette smoke. I was looking out for the cretins, as I would have told them to stop, but I couldn't find them. And then as I spotted a group of 3 moron blokes, one of whom was puffing a spliff, security came over and kicked them all out. Hurrah! Keep fighting the good fight. I mean, there's no question that it's a really, really bad problem. The stink of marijuana, weed, whatever you want to call it, is overwhelming quite often in all sorts of places. And it's hard to go a day without smelling it. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, Rob McKellar's going to join us, Legal Services Director at Peninsula, a global employment law consultancy. Angela Rayner is after you. She's going to put the banter police into your office. So you better be careful what you say before you end up being dragged off by the police and stuck in a prison cell for 12 hours. This is Talk.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 7:53, very nearly 8 o'clock. The weather's still looking a bit grim, ladies and gentlemen, this morning. The rains have sort of fallen upon the capital. It is going to lift, apparently, by about 10 o'clock, quarter to 11. So the day will get better. But it's been wonderful, hasn't it? It's been beautiful. It's going to get very hot again towards the end of this week. For those of you who are in other parts of the country where it's doing something completely different, well, just tell me what it's doing. Mike, this is simple, says Tony in Barrow. The money paid to France could hire ex-French Foreign Legion on high-speed jet skis to puncture the dinghies while still in 2 feet of water so they can walk back up the beach. No one drowns, done every day for 4 months, would end the people smugglers' business plan, and no ECHR ruling to stop us. I mean, interesting that you say that, Tony. I've been advocating for this kind of behaviour for years and years and years. What I said to them they should also do is just patrol all of that section of the beach. But as Nigel Farage has said, there's about 100 miles of beach to patrol, so there's quite a lot of it, and they'll always probably find some way of getting away, because the rewards for getting here are so high and so much in demand that people will do anything to get here, and that's part of the point. Let's get a voice note from Ash on wealth tax.
Morning, Mike. Ash from Preston. Wealth tax, wow, that's going to be the final death nail in the coffin of all the tax revenue. If I was a millionaire or billionaire or a successful business owner, the first thing I'd do is book a flight out of here, take all my money, all my tax revenue and all my jobs with me to another country where they actually want people to start up businesses and be successful. Cheers, great show.
Yeah, I think, Ash, an awful lot of people are doing exactly what you've just described, because it's not just the fact that money is tighter, it's not just the fact that taxes are going up. We've now got the banter police, as invented by Angela Rayner. Watch what you say by the water cooler, is what it's now saying. Workers' rights bill pressures firms to spy on inappropriate conversations. Rob McKellar is here, Legal Services Director at Peninsula Global Employment Law Consultancy. Rob, very good morning to you.
Mike.
So, we're going to be told there are things we should and shouldn't say, I dare say. Are you finding that companies are having to draw up, you know, new sort of rules of engagement for each other?
Well, look, we live in incredibly difficult times to be an employer, and things are only going to become more difficult with the passing of the Employment Rights Bill. The principal point of peculiarity with this is that the government proposes to introduce further changes in October 26 around taking reasonable steps in respect, or all reasonable steps, I should say, in respect of sexual harassment. And then at some uncommitted time in 2027, they propose to pass regulations to tell us what that actually means.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, there's a lot of vagueness in what is being proposed, it seems to me. The bill doesn't stipulate any ring fencing about the expression of opinions on political, moral, religious or social matters. So it's going to be very much down to whoever's going to take offence, isn't it, by the sounds of it?
Well, perception and interpretation are key in the matter, and that does present significant risks to employers who are ultimately liable for the actions of their employees. Equally, there's a significant lack of clarity around the position on protection from harassment by third parties. Employers will be required to put in place all reasonable steps to prevent harassment by third parties. Now, if you have a business that includes working in an office, providing email-based advice, that may be a little easier to do. If your employees are working in a pub pulling pints to drunk people in the evenings, that may be a lot more difficult.
Yes, indeed. And there's no differentiation, presumably, is there?
Not on the text of the legislation as it currently stands.
Yeah.
Whether the devil will be in the detail of the regulations that eventually come is yet to be seen. But ultimately, employers are left trying to guess what is and is not acceptable. And in order to be in a position where your business is protected, you need at this time to become the fun police. Whilst many employers may not agree with that, they may perhaps be more inclined to agree with it when they hear the kind of quantum of damages that could be awarded against them in an employment tribunal if they get it wrong.
And so what kinds of things, if you were advising people to say to their employees, would you say stay away from certain conversations? Is that where it's going to go, where people will just not want to talk to each other?
Well, there are some easy conversations to stay away from, things that perhaps may be of a political nature, relating to religion, that overtly relate to protected characteristics under the Equality Act. But where it becomes a lot more difficult is where something may indirectly relate to a protected characteristic, or somebody may be more inclined to be offended by something than somebody else. So, for example, there was a recent case in the Employment Tribunal where somebody called another employee a Karen, and that was deemed to be found to relate to their age, to their sex, and to their race. Equally, there was a reference to somebody as a dinosaur, which was deemed in the Employment Tribunal to be a reference to age. So what may be considered by one person to be harmless fun may be considered by another to be deeply offensive. And a point that I would make is that comments that have been made in the past can't be erased, but relationships, particularly in the employment context, can change overnight. So ultimately, what somebody may accept as a bit of harmless fun one day may suddenly be turned and brought to an employment tribunal.
And so bar staff, you can have problematic conversations, I suppose, with each other. Can they also report something they overhear if you're standing at the bar talking about, you know, how useless the Labour government is?
Well, that is the risk. And I should say that criticising a government...
That'll be the end of me going to pubs.
Indeed. But certainly criticising a political party wouldn't be deemed to fall within the category of harassment. It does have to relate to a protected characteristic. It does have to create an environment that is hostile or degrading, among other things. And there are instances where what's known as banter has been found by the Employment Tribunal to be acceptable. There was one particular case recently where somebody was referred to as fat and ginger, and then a racial slur was used relating to their background being in the travelling community. Now, in that particular case, it was found that that wasn't harassment because of the extent to which that individual themselves also dished it
Unbelievable.
out.
How did we get to this place? Listen, I've got to run. Rob, we'll be back after this. Thank you. We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet, and it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
And one here from Dan in Hampshire.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 8. It is Monday, the 7th of July. It is 20 years, of course, since that terrible day on 7/7, as it was known, in 2005, when so many people were blown up in London. 4 separate bombs taking the lives of so many innocent people. We're going to be watching later on today as the King makes a statement before as a celebration, or a commemoration rather, in St Paul's Cathedral, which will honour those who lost their lives, and also so many of the emergency workers who did such an incredible job helping those people who were injured in so many different horrible ways. Many of them life-changing injuries, many of them absolutely just dreadful things that have happened that they'd seen. Many people, of course, who survived that day still suffer from PTSD. For those of you who weren't here and you don't remember it, we will be talking about that. We'll take your stories and your explanations of what happened to you on that particular day. Coming up in this house, John Redwood is here, former Conservative MP. The King will be urging for people to not allow us to be divided, which I'm not sure is entirely the best message at this time in this country, when we are getting more and more divided by the day, not least between those who pay for everything and those who don't. Between those who love this country and those who come here to take advantage of it. So many different possibilities that we could have in this country being completely ruined by the fact that we have so many people either on benefits in this country or coming into this country and seeking a life which is basically subsidised by the taxpayer. We learned over the weekend that 69,000 jobs have been lost in hospitality alone. There's another story in the Telegraph today. The number of summer jobs on offer has slumped to a 7-year low. Seasonal vacancies have fallen to their lowest level since 2018, largely because of the increase in national insurance for employees. We've got another bad week looming for the Labour government. Keir Starmer now facing a second backbench revolt, this time on the removal of grants and special educational needs money, which is going to be taken away from disabled children. Whatever next? 0344 499 1000. We've also got Wayne Rooney, the latest bonanza for him, £800,000 being given to him by the BBC. They were supposed to be trying to save money after they got rid of Gary Lineker. Well, they've given practically the same money to Wayne Rooney to be a pundit on Match of the Day. And finally, one story which I think has got everybody going absolutely insane. The police have said, you know what? It should really be a giveaway. If you smell cannabis and you see people smoking it, it probably means there's a bit of criminality going on around them. 0344 499 1000. Let's get Sharon on Starmer's social media.
Hi, Mike. Regarding the Starmer selfie videos you were talking about at the beginning of your show, it really conjures up images of dictator states, especially those in the Middle East, North Korea, etc., where the leader's image is plastered all over cities, on billboards and public places. This feels like the modern version of that, just using social media. Quite sinister, if you ask me. I dread to think how much this vanity project is costing us. I thought there was no money because of the numerous black holes that keep appearing. How can the government have any credibility if this is how they are behaving?
Very good point. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Keir Starmer continues to put out these kind of nebulous and pointless and rather idiotic videos where he tries to convince, presumably himself as well as everybody else, that it's all going terribly well. It's all going swimmingly, and this is what we're doing for you working people. This is what we're doing to make you better off, to get the pound in your pocket worth more money. You know, it's a sort of never-ending narrative of nonsense. None of it's true, and I don't know who he thinks he's kidding by putting these things out. Let's ask Sir John Redwood, former Conservative MP, of course. Sir John, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
We live in interesting times, as the saying goes. Nothing seems to be going very well for the government, and it looks as though this week's not going to be any better.
No, I know. I can't believe that they're thinking of doing a repeat of what they did to disabled people on children who have special needs. And there are so many of those children who have genuine needs which are provided for under contracts, and some of them are at private schools. And Labour's hatred of all that seems to overcome normal human sympathy.
Yes.
It may be that there are too many people now qualifying for rather lesser conditions. That's worth looking at. But don't threaten all those people who already legitimately got this and need that day by day to help bring up their children.
No, they seem to have no nuance about them, which surprises me. You know, they sort of, everything is a sledgehammer to crack a nut, you know, instead of actually being sensible like they could have been with the Winterfield allowance for pensioners. Everybody urged them to take their time and to give it a bit more time before they could see where they could make the cut, which most people would agree with, that, you know, if you're wealthy and you're reasonably well off, you don't need it. But they didn't do that. They just went blanket ban. And the same for, you know, the no need for a national inquiry into the Muslim grooming rape gangs. Oh, no, don't need that. We've already done one. And then suddenly, oh, now we do need one because a baroness has told us so. You know, it's all very kind of chunky. It's very jerky sort of government. You know, they seem to lurch from one thing to another, lurch across the carriageway and then lurch back again.
Well, indeed. And you'd have thought they'd have some common humanity, wouldn't you? And
yeah.
I remember as an MP, the first thing I always asked myself when some new idea was put in front of me was, how would it affect the poorest or the worst off or the person who's most likely to be affected in my constituency? And was that acceptable? And quite often it wasn't. And we see with Keir Starmer, he couldn't even turn to his Chancellor when she was in clear distress in Prime Minister's questions and say something reassuring. And he wouldn't even say to the House of Commons that she was going to keep her job. And then a few hours later, his spin doctors presumably told him that the markets wouldn't like it if they thought the Chancellor was about to be fired. So he then had to say what he should have said at the time out of normal human sympathy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a very odd moment. I think it will probably define him and his government over time. Because looking at the stories in the Telegraph today about a wealth tax being considered, and of course the unions are quite keen on it, Neil Kinnock's certainly keen on it, then the sheer numbers, I mean, I'm looking at numbers today, which I'm sure you've seen, Harry Cole's published them on Twitter, coming from Henley and Partners. It's around about sort of 35 to 40,000 people basically leaving the country as a result of the high taxes that have already been placed on people who are reasonably well-off individuals. And the bulk of them, 10,000 of them practically, and another 7,500 going to the UAE and the United States.
Yeah, indeed. And why don't they understand this very simple point? I mean, the Treasury advisors ought to be warning the Chancellor of this by now, that getting rid of all the non-dom tax arrangements just meant that a lot of very rich billionaires left who were paying very large sums of money to our country. And then the other taxes started hitting people who got a few millions who thought, well, I want to hold on to these and I can pay a lot less tax if I go somewhere warmer and maybe even nicer, they thought. So it's a disaster for the government that they don't understand this. And they should look at their own numbers and realise that the top 1% of income taxpayers are already paying 30% of the income tax. How much more do you think you're going to get out of them? It's far more than most other countries do.
Well, quite. And also, somebody was extrapolating that round to kind of, you know, the top 10% of people, how much they pay and the top 25% of people pay something like 75% of the income tax in this country.
That's right. And none of us mind the rich paying more. Of course the rich should pay more because they've got more money. And those of us who've got a bit better income are happy to pay a bit more so that other people get something to help them with their lifestyles. But there are limits to that. And we're seeing that this government has gone well beyond the limits. And the idea that there are a lot of people with a few millions who are prepared to pay 2% of their wealth every year is just completely bonkers. And there are quite a lot of people who've got quite a bit of wealth tied up in a house or some kind of trust fund or something, which they can't lay their hands on, who haven't got the income to pay a whole load more tax.
Right. And that's the problem. It's the same solution to the same kind of situation with the farming inheritance tax, isn't it? That, you know, on paper, it looks like to a government a government analyst that there's somebody with a load of money there, but actually they're sort of, you know, they're not cash rich. They don't have the ability to pay tax on an asset, which they're not really milking.
No, indeed. And the farmers, very often, they're getting very low returns indeed. Because remember, they need to earn their own income for all the work they put in, and then they ought to get some return on all the capital they got tied up. And they scarcely get one of those, let alone both. And then the government says, oh, well, you're very rich. We'll make sure we take a bit of the farm away if you die or if you pass it on to your children.
Yeah.
And then you won't have the same number of family farms. And it's becoming very marginal. I want us to grow a lot more food in this country, and that could be done with a little bit of support for the family farms. Instead, they've got to be taxed out of existence.
Yeah. And do you think this government really is as useless as it appears to be? Is it being driven? It's kind of mysterious to me whether it's being driven by this ideology of kind of, you know, laying bare, you know, everything that made Britain what it is, and having a kind of a grudge against a lot of what we like to celebrate as British. I was at Wimbledon on Saturday, and I just thought to myself, you know, when people were cheering for the armed forces and welcoming, you know, various celebrities from the sporting world, you know, I thought this is the real Britain, and this is what we should celebrate, and we should we should not forget that this is what most of Britain is actually like.
Indeed, we've got a huge amount to be proud of, and there's a lot of beauty in the countryside and in some of our older buildings in this country, and there's a lot of people who are generous and full of goodwill and undertake charitable works, and yet Labour ministers seem to hate a lot of us and want to just take more tax off us or drive us out of the country and undermine the values that Britain has stood for so many years. I think it's a tragedy. I don't know why they're so tone deaf. I suppose it's because there's a series of extreme left-wingers within the party making ministers' lives a misery and driving them in the wrong direction. And I think this latest possible attack on special educational needs is because they don't like the fact that some people are getting state help to go to a private sector school, which happens to be the specialist school that child needs. Well, get over the ideology. This is something that is well done, meeting the need of a family that otherwise would be in trouble, and you shouldn't be attacking them.
No. Let me play you what Bridget Phillipson said yesterday about what they think that they've done well.
Your colleague, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, said he'd give you 7 out of 10. What would you give yourselves as a government?
I think I'd be inclined to agree with Johnny. I think that's about right. I think we have made enormous strides forward in a lot of areas. Of course, there's more to do. And of course, we hear what voters are telling us, that they voted for change, they're impatient for change, they want to see it and feel it in their communities.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Johnny Reynolds. I'm not sure that's going to stick, but they seem slightly deluded as well, don't they, about the things that they've had successes at?
Well, did you notice she didn't list a single one?
No.
And so what are they really proud of? And she didn't also admit that so many things have gone disastrously wrong. I mean, robbing the pensioners turned out to be a bad idea, and they cancelled that. Threatening the disabled turned out to be a bad idea. Giving away the Chagos Islands and a load of money to Mauritius is deeply unpopular and stupid when you're short of money. They've put in unemployment up. They've taken job vacancies down. They've put long-term interest rates up by a bad budget. They've overtaxed people so that 10,000 millionaires have left already, and many more are going to be leaving this year. And there's just such a long list of chronic failures, obvious things that you and I and more than half the British public were telling the Labour government not to do, and they were unable to listen, and they were unable to understand simple English.
I mean, that is a massive, massive problem, isn't it? Because every year that Labour are in for, if it's as bad as this one, I'm not sure where we're going to be if they last out a full 5-year term, because, you know, the economy is already suffering grave warnings from international boards and things, people saying, you know, we're going to borrow so much money, we literally won't be able to borrow any more.
Well, that's right. And the shocking fact is that Rachel Reeves said that when longer-term interest rates for one day got to quite a high level under Liz Truss, she said that that had crashed the economy. Well, this year, those longer-term interest rates, all this year so far, have been well above that one-day Liz Truss level. So on her own basis, the Chancellor has more than crashed the economy. It's been a serial crash doing serious damage. And why do we have so little money to spend on worthwhile things? Well, it's because we're now paying over 100 billion a year in interest charges on all the debt so far. And this government thinks they want to increase the amount of extra debt compared with the old Conservative plans. And they're going to end up paying much more interest on every bit of debt they take out, because the markets are saying, we don't trust you, you're overspending, you're not serious about controlling the public money. And normally when a government starts to lose control of the public money, it loses public support. And if it doesn't change, then it gets thrown out of office. And after all, the Labour government of the 1970s had to go to the IMF to borrow money and created a complete disaster. The Labour government in 2010 fell over because it had run out of money. They themselves said they'd run out of money, and they made a complete mess of public finances, and Conservatives had to come in and reduce their planned spending in order to make things more affordable. I'm surprised that in their first year they're already getting themselves into that position, and they really ought to read a bit of the history books or talk to some of their former colleagues who presided over the previous crashes.
Yeah, because I think that's exactly where we are. I don't think we're very, very far from another one, do you?
No, I think we're on the way to one, and they should pull back before it is too late. All of us want our country to do well, and you know, Labour say some of the right things. That the way to reduce the benefit bill is to get more people into work. Well, to get more people into work, you need an expanding economy, and they're discovering that high tax, high borrowing, high interest rates does the opposite. So instead of getting people off benefits into work, they're going to have more people wanting benefits. And then the Labour response is, well, why don't we cut the benefits on people like the disabled? And the public understandably said, no, that's not what we wanted at all.
No.
We want real change to have faster growth. How do you get faster growth? Lower tax rates. That's what works around the world. Just look at our neighbours in Ireland. They set a much lower business tax rate than us, and they actually clean up. They take all the big American investments, many of which would come to Britain, if we had a competitive tax rate.
Yeah, I know, it's tragic, absolutely tragic. So John Redwood, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Former Conservative MP there, saying we are perilously close to some previous Labour government fiscal crises. And we're going to talk to Harry Cole coming up in a moment. He's the Sun editor at large, of course, big column in the paper today, complete with a crystal ball. Let's get a voice note from David.
Morning, Mike. David from Derby. Oh, just on the way to Warrington, shaking my head, just thinking, I work in sales, and I know what I need to do to sell things. I know what the answer is. I know how to do it. I know what gets results. Keir Starmer, do something on this illegal immigration. Do something. We all know in the UK what the answer is. Turn the boats around. Stop the benefits. Stop the migration hotels. Turn them around. Take them back. Does he not wake up in the morning and think, right, well, this is going to work. That would work. So what I'll do, I'll fix it. Fix it. Fix it, Starmer. Just do something. Do something that will actually fix it and stop sounding like a robot. It's not difficult. Fix it.
You wouldn't think it was difficult. He's got the tools, he's got the power, he's got the ability, you would think, to fix it. He is the Prime Minister. You know, he can make any law that he wants. He's got a massive majority, but he can't even get it past his own people because he doesn't know how to fix it. He's not fixing the foundations, is he? He's busting them. That's the problem. Let's get Harry Cole coming up next.
wasn't a surprise to me that Keir Starmer decided to U-turn on the grooming gang scandal. This was a subject which exploded.
The most sickening, disgusting thing that I've seen this government do was the cover-up, and it is a cover-up, I'm sorry, over the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. How dare our Prime Minister turn around and say calls for a national inquiry into a sexual genocide, the most horrific scandal that's ever befallen this country, ever, ever, ever in history.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:23. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when it's time for Julia Hartley-Brewer. Harry Coles here, editor-at-large at The Sun. We've got a voice note coming up first of all, though. Let's have a listen.
Morning, Mike. It's Paula in Liverpool. I feel as though I ring about this every single week. But why do we need a deterrent? If we stop the pull factor, they'll stop wanting to come. Why do we feel that we need to give them hotel rooms, board and lodgings, medical appointments, flying lessons, when the rest of Europe will give them a tent and a few quid? That might sound harsh, but we need to stop people wanting to come here. We are killing ourselves trying to pay for this. You know, and stop all illegal aid. Why are they entitled to it? It's just bonkers. We need to stop before this country is bankrupt. Thanks, Mike. Paula in Liverpool.
Paula, very well said. Yeah, we do need to stop before the country's bankrupt, because with all this talk of us running out of money, with all this talk of cutting benefits to people who are disabled, now cutting benefits to children who are disabled because we haven't got any money, we keep handing billions and billions of pounds over to house these migrants who keep coming here at our expense, not theirs. Harry Coles here. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are we doing?
Very well indeed. Great column this morning. I quite like the vision of you as a kind of, a seer of your crystal ball there. It's quite an entertaining one, that.
Not sure about the cartoon, personally. We'll see.
Yeah, but the piece itself, it talks about what a miserable week that was last week, but there's worse to come, effectively.
Well, look, I think, if you enjoyed season 1 of Labour's Fast Show, then season 2, just round the corner. 1 year on, it's, as we discussed last week, pretty unhappy birthday for Keir Starmer. Yeah. I don't think anyone would have predicted it would be quite as an up and down week as we saw, literally with the Chancellor in tears, his humiliating U-turn on benefits. Markets up and down. There's a feeling around Keir Starmer, even his closest supporters, you can't have many more weeks like that and expect to remain credible and remain in power. So I've had a look ahead at what's coming up for Labour.
Yeah.
And it's not, on the horizon, there's some big issues. The budget in September is going to be huge. Big elections next year. And he's going to have a reshuffle at some point. I think it's about 50-50 whether the Chancellor survives to the end of the year. As we keep hearing, as your listeners keep ringing in with those voice notes, he's got to do something about the boat soon. Yeah. The French are arriving. Macron's coming this week. We saw them slash and pop. One boat. Mysteriously happens just before the French president arrives to say thank you very much for his very large cheque.
Absolutely right. And of course, we see from your spread in the paper today on the migration problem that there's more and more people coming. The French are doing less and less really effectively. And it's, I was saying earlier, you could almost put together a video. It's a sort of chariots of fire type scenario. These people sort of running through the waves to jump onto dinghies, which are coming in ever bigger numbers. The French unable to stop them. There doesn't appear to be any end in sight, regardless of what Macron and Starmer talk about. And it looks like the EU is going to kibosh this one in, one out thing anyway.
Yeah, the one in, one out thing's been worked on for a long time. Rishi Sunak was having a look at that at one point. That's been in discussions for a while. It essentially says that if we take one, if there's someone who's here who comes here illegally and they have no connection to this country, they have no right to stay here, we send them to France. In return, France will give someone who's been approved for asylum, who has family connections here. I mean, I can't really see it. I mean, it might get the hotel bill down a little bit if they've got somewhere to stay and family to stay with, but I can't really see it getting the numbers overall down. It seems to be a little bit of a tinkering at the edge when, you know, fundamental reforms are needed. What is interesting is about that video that the BBC were mysteriously there to capture last week is the French can stop the boats. At the moment, they're stopping about 1 in 7 people from crossing. But, you know, it shows when there is a will, there's a way, which was get in the water and slash the boats. You know, these are shallow waters. These are overcrowded boats. You know, majority predominantly men. They've been saying, oh, it's not safe to enter the water. Well, you know, it seems to be the only way that actually works. So let's see some more of that. I don't understand why, if the principle of how you do it has been proven and shown to work, why that's now not standard procedure.
Well, quite. If you puncture all the boats, there's got no boats to get into. I mean, I was saying this years ago. You know, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, I don't understand. I don't see what the logic is for that not now become the de facto go-to tactic.
Right.
If the French are really, willing to actually stop all the boats.
Right.
And you wonder whether they are when French ministers are out there making the point that, you know, it's all very well asking them to stop the boats, but we do have a very alluring pull factor, as your previous caller just said. Our package of our arrival package, shall we say, of hotels and legal aid and support and money, and the ability to work very quickly, as we saw in the recent weeks in the black market, delivering things on motorbikes almost the day you arrive. Our package is sort of very alluring, and maybe the French would be willing to play a little fairer if it wasn't such a pull factor of people coming across France to come to us.
Yeah, and meanwhile, it looks like a second big backbench rebellion coming up on these disability benefits for children. Plus, you retweeted a thing at the weekend about the number of millionaires leaving the country. Now, I counted it up roughly. It's somewhere between 35 and 40,000. Quite a lot of people going from places like Seychelles and Hungary and Belgium and Bermuda all the way up to like nearly 10,000 going to the UAE. I mean, that's not an insignificant number of people.
It's not. I know, you'll have a load of lefties and Labour MPs going, "Oh, let them go. If they don't like it, let them go." Well, yeah, fine, let them go, but good luck trying to fill the tax gap that is created by these people leaving. I think people fundamentally understand quite how much the top 10% of this country pay in tax and keep the lights on, literally, keep the NHS going, literally. And so, again, another big headache coming down the line for Rachel Reeves. Is estimated now at the moment she's looking at looking for another £20 billion black hole.
Yeah.
The vicious cycle goes on of the OBI will say you haven't got enough money, you needed some headroom, and round we go and round we go. And, she was very clear last November. She said, I will not be coming back for any more borrowing or any more taxes. Her fiscal rules and the Labour manifesto was very clear. But the most telling moment, aside from her tears on Wednesday, was on Friday when she popped up, or Thursday or Friday, whatever it was, she popped up, grinning, pretending everything was fine. She very clearly didn't repeat that promise. She won't increase borrowing, she won't increase taxation. And I think if she's forced to get rid of those fiscal rules, which seems to be the only thing that the markets are really looking at with any confidence in the UK, is the fact that she's got these rules that says she's not going to increase borrowing. They're looking at the Labour MPs who are refusing to accept any form of spending cut, really, and now have got a taste of a rebellion. She's in a really, really tricky spot, because it's any attempt to reduce spending is going to be met by rebellion. She can't increase borrowing and remain credible, and so and the tax take is going to be down. So, we'll start to hear lots of different theories about what she could do over the summer in the run-up to the budget. But whatever it is going to be unpopular.
And is anyone digging around as to what actually happened on Wednesday? Because she seemed to have completely recovered on Thursday. Many of us saying, well, if it was a personal issue, you don't normally suddenly go from really, really the depths of depression and just absolute sobbing to suddenly smiling and laughing and joking and, saying, oh, I just had a bad day at the office. I mean, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, talking to people around, I suspect, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was lots of things on top of each other that suddenly, she slightly cracked, I think. Yeah. Look, I feel for you personally, it was horrible to watch, on a human-to-human level, but I do wonder whether, that... I don't think, having the woman literally in charge of our finances, you saw exactly what happened to the markets during that process. I think it was almost a sort of metaphor for of Labour's woes that week.
It really was.
Hard to watch, but I don't. Whatever the details were, well, I guess we'll never know. But my suspicion is it was a sort of lots of things on top of each other, and just came together at a terrible moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're off to America shortly, so I thought we'd play you a little special. This is Caroline Levitt. I don't know whether you've seen this. This is one of her regular briefings to the White House press corps about how the Trump administration is doing. Check it out.
The jobs numbers for the month of June are in, and the United States added 147,000 jobs, exceeding market expectations for the 4th month in a row. In a huge win for women who play sports, the Department of Education secured an agreement with the University of Pennsylvania to remove men from women's sports, and it corrects the record in favor of sanity. President Trump continues to deliver trade deals. He announced a trade deal with Vietnam, which will give the U.S. total access to their markets for the first time ever. And finally, Congress worked hard to deliver the one big beautiful bill to President Trump's desk. This bill means no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, and a big beautiful tax cut for everyone. It's on the way. And for those of you celebrating our nation's birthday, the cost of a 4th of July cookout for 10 people skyrocketed by more than 20% under Joe Biden, but that cost has dropped under President Trump.
Makes me want to come with you. It's all looking a bit. It's what a contrast to what we get from Starmer's brigade every week.
Almost like having an elected politician actually do what they said they were going to do in a campaign.
Right.
It actually works. I mean, Donald Trump had a good couple. He's had a very good couple of weeks. I think the remarkable resilience of the U.S. economy is something to behold. It does really show you what you can do when you do have some growth coming in and you have some good numbers, which is something we're sorely missing here. And also the remarkable thing about the U.S. U.S. election cycle is that Congress is now almost back into campaign mode already. Because they've got the midterms in next November. So. The big beautiful bill, as it was almost, it was a referendum on Trump, really, because there were lots of things in that bill that, some Republicans didn't like, not least increasing spending and lifting the debt ceiling. But, Donald Trump is delivering. He still remains incredibly popular with his base. And it would have taken a brave Republican congressman to vote against the president.
Absolutely, yeah. And like many times when you've been there before, you'll meet loads of people who'll go, they do what? Where you come from? They do what? What do they do? The fact that, we get taxed so much, the fact that we have to pay for people's health care who can't afford it for themselves. They're literally incredulous about the way that Britain is run. And now probably they'll be even more incredulous with what's going on.
Yeah, no, really interesting reforms to their state-provided healthcare, Medicaid, in that bill, which said, that they face reductions to their state support, unless they go and look for a job. I mean, what a remarkably clever idea that is. Why has no one thought of that one before?
I know. And just a little bit of a piece of fun. Trump was visited, I think, by the Prime Minister of Japan. He couldn't remember his name, so he gave him another name.
We still don't know. We don't have the clarity on what you're going to do with these expiration of these pauses. July 9?
No, I thought I just said it. No, I thought I just said it. You ready?
You're going to send letters.
I'm going to send letters. That's the end of the trade deal. I could send one to Japan. Dear Mr. Japan, here's the story. You're going to pay a 25% tariff on your cars, So we give Japan no cars. They won't take our cars, right?
Dear Mr. Japan. It's great, isn't it?
I mean, Donald Trump's coming to the UK twice in the coming months. He'll be here in August to visit his golf courses, and he'll be here on a state visit in September. Right? He'll be hoping that Keir Starmer will be hoping that he gets at least a Mr. Starmer rather than a Mr. England.
Yeah, Mr. England. Yeah, well, to be honest, I didn't even know about that clip until I read it in your column. So we went and found it. It's very funny.
Absolutely super.
Very funny.
I mean, we don't really deserve him. What people, I mean, the coverage of Donald Trump is so hysterical at times that you don't realise that actually people just need to. I mean, it is a remarkable politician to cover. How he gets away with stuff that other people would have just. Yeah, the guy is Teflon.
He is extraordinary. Another great column. Harry, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Cole, the Sun's editor at large, out and about there talking about Labour's future is a crystal balls up. You can't disagree with any of that. Let's get a voice note.
Absolutely disgusted, Mike. All this money, right? handing over illegal immigrants 60 million to fight asylum claims, when we hear on the radio this morning as well that they can no longer support the state pension for us past 2036, and they're trying to get them to cut the triple lock. What the hell is going on, right? Where every penny now is going out to foreigners and nothing's going to us. They're taking it way, way too far now. They need to stop giving money away to all these foreigners now. Full stop. End of.
It's absolutely right. This is what people are getting fed up with. I mean, Starmer had the gall to put out a tweet this weekend about how Britain was fairer, and it's all about making Britain a fairer country for everybody. Well, it's not fair, and that's what everybody sees. Everybody sees absolutely what is not fair about this country, and it's the fact that people are being given money while the working people that he refers to all the time are just being taxed and taxed and taxed and taxed. And quite right, as Pete says, now they want to tax your pension. So you won't be able to have any decent sort of retirement either. Let's have a look at what's going on the Sun Letters page. And it's all about David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, or David Lamey, as he was monikered by one of our listeners this morning. Eric says this: so the Foreign Secretary is off on another taxpayer-funded trip, this time to Syria, where I read that he is giving them a £94.5 million aid package. Back in the UK, employers are being taxed to their knees, people with savings in ISAs are likely to be targeted by Chancellor Rachel Reeves, and more pensioners will be dragged into paying income tax. But Labour not only sees more importance in keeping migrants housed and fed, now David Lammy is shelling out more of our cash to other countries. Only 4 more years to go. Barry in West Yorkshire says this: David Lammy has promised £94.5 million in aid to the new regime in Syria. I'm sure Britain could afford it by creaming the top of the supposed black hole. Or am I being too cynical? Yeah, I mean, that's the trouble. People are seeing it. They're standing there and they're seeing it being done to them. They're being ripped off before their very eyes. Coming up, we're going to talk to Suzanne Evans, journalist and politician, about her take on what's going on. There's the migrant tracker, 44,359. It practically made it to 45, as I said it would, for July the 4th. And if you count all the people that we haven't counted, like those jumping out the back of lorries in places like Cambridge, I think you'll find 45,000 is a bit of an underestimate. 8:39.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:42. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until the end of the show at 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. Good show, says Mike in Dubai. I don't understand this nonsense about entering the water to slash the boats. There is ample time before the boat gets anywhere near the water to slash or disable them. Well, true. And one from Colin who says, if Starmer is so afraid of the human rights laws, why don't we treat the illegal immigrants exactly the same way as the French, who are also under the ECHR? No hotels, no phones, no houses, no flats, no money, etc. The ECHR doesn't come after the French. You know, I've been saying this for years. The French, like many other European countries, just ignore the ECHR whenever they feel like it. You know, there's no reason why we should not do exactly the same thing. I've said this before. They don't need to get all hot and bothered about leaving the ECHR and thinking that we're all going to turn into Belarusians. No, you just ignore it. Simple as that. Suzanne Evans is here, journalist and political consultant. Suzanne, very good morning to you.
Morning.
People are getting more and more fed up in this country. I get the feeling every single day as they see unfairness upon unfairness coming their way. You know, people, you know, watch how hard it is for them to make money, how hard it is to keep the money that they make, and it's just a vicious circle now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting how lots of people on the left of politics who have been following on Twitter for a while, even they now are starting to really raise questions about this and seeing the unfairness of it. Like Peter, who had that voice text earlier, was talking about how unfair it was and people were fed up with it. I mean, I think that's how the majority of the population are thinking now. And there's almost a real sense of rebellion in the air against it all, and people getting so frustrated because they feel so helpless.
Yeah.
You know, we've had the past Conservative government, we've got the current Labour government. They all promised to stop the boats, smash the gangs in Keir Starmer's place. And what's happened? They haven't smashed them at all. They haven't stopped them. They're just putting more and more and more money into actually keeping the system going. And people are absolutely incensed. And this latest initiative that's been announced to give £60 million to lawyers to give to migrants to help them fight their claim for asylum is just yet another example of that. And you wonder, well, why is taxpayers' money being wasted in this way? And then you think, well, Keir Starmer's a lawyer. Maybe he's just spreading the money around to his lawyer friends. I mean, that's what I'm hearing people saying on social media. And yeah, people are very, very angry. You know, the asylum accommodation bill was supposed to be around $4.5 billion between 2019 and 2029. That's now rocketed. The estimates are now 15.3 billion. I suspect it's going to be even higher than that. That's 3 times the welfare cuts that Labour rejected last week.
Yeah, exactly right. And then the other thing we learned last week was that so many people who come to this country on work visas and on student visas, who overstay those visas, they just disappear into the ether. Some of them, in fact, claim asylum, and then they get put up in asylum hotels. So we're paying for all these people to live here, while at the same time the people who are working very hard, and we hear from them every single day, you know, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, getting out to work, sometimes working 2 jobs. You know, they're seeing so many people get things for nothing. We used to be told, didn't we, for years, oh, migrants can't get benefits. You know, nobody comes here from abroad can get benefits. Well, they all do, and they all get them.
Yeah, it's absolutely infuriating. And I think a lot of people feel, that foreigners shouldn't get benefits. You know, if you or I, Mike, went to, I don't know, America, say, we wouldn't be able to claim any benefits, and probably would have to put a disclaimer saying that we would not ever claim benefits in order to get permanent leave to remain there. And
well, even to get a visa to go there on holiday, you have to sort of, you know, sign a declaration that you won't become a burden on the state.
Absolutely, that you won't overstay and all the rest of it. And I'm sure we have those caveats with our visas too. But the fact is, as you say, it is routinely ignored. The other thing I think that I sense a real frustration about is the big kind of multinational companies, like delivery organisations, for example, who we know employ these illegal migrants, and they must know it's going on, and yet they do nothing about it. There's a huge sense of anger about that too, how easy it is for an illegal migrant to actually get into the work system and presumably take cash in hand and not pay any tax and claim benefits on the side as well. And I think that's also another reason why Keir Starmer's popularity has absolutely plummeted. You will know there was a Sunday Times poll yesterday showing that his popularity had plummeted from +10 in August last year to -40 now. I mean, that is an astonishing plunge. any prime minister in their first year of office. People are furious that he hasn't got a grip on this as he promised. Although, of course, there are lots of us who are very cynical that he would get a grip on it, and we merely felt that Smash the Gangs was not a policy, just a soundbite to try and win votes.
Yeah.
I think that's proven to be the case.
Well, it has, like so much of their policies and their pledges. You know, they say they're doing things, but an awful lot of what they do is sort of performative. And, you know, we're making change happen. And you go, well, that doesn't mean anything. You're not making change happen. You know, we're fixing the foundations. No, not really. You know, we're smashing the gangs. Not really. You know, we're bringing, trade back into Britain with international deals. Not really. You know, none of it really is worth the paper it's written on.
It isn't. It's quite interesting that there have been 2 videos put out by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary on social media just in the last few days. In both of them, they're looking very grand in smart suits, travelling the world stage. You know, you've got one of Starmer signing papers in Number 10, walking away from a helicopter. You've got David Lammy doing much the same thing in another video. And is that all they've got to say? Oh, we look big. We're great big looking statesmen on the world scale. Where's the actual action? The other thing, Mike, you're absolutely right about them not doing things that they said they're going to do. Of course, the other frustration is the stuff they're doing that they never said they would do. So the winter fuel allowance, pensioners, the family farm tax, giving away the Chagos Islands, all these other things. It's like they had a secret manifesto that they've come into power with and that they've run with, whereas the actual manifesto that people voted on and put them into power has been tossed in the bin.
Yeah.
It's infuriating.
It really is, absolutely, and it can't go on forever like this. It really can't. People are getting really angry. Suzanne, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We're short of time, I'm afraid. Suzanne Evans, there, journalist and political consultant. Let's get a quick voice note from George.
Every time you mention the, economically challenged, whatever, it always makes me feel guilty. I'm 59 years old. I've worked quite a bit of my life. I won't say all my life, but I've had a few times off. I look after my wife, who's disabled. I can't work myself because I'm caring for her and because of a back injury. I know, the good old bad back. And I just feel guilty every time you guys mention it. I don't think you're having a pop at me, but it always feels like some of us are getting the rough end of the stick when we're economically inactive, and through no fault of our own. I wish I was paid everything. I get PIP, but I don't get any car.
George, thanks very much indeed. Listen, I'm not having a pop at anyone, particularly people who have worked and who somehow now found themselves unable to do that because of some injury or other. That's not the issue. The issue is the people who don't do any work and who have never really thought of doing any work and who are continually on the take. And they don't even think about going to work because they don't feel the need. And in some ways, I don't even really blame them either, because it's the government which allows them to do that, which is the problem. That's really bad. Derek says this: a year of chaos, brilliant. And there was so much more. With this lot, you could do a weekly version of the Week of Chaos. That's right. That's to be found, if you haven't watched it yet, on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Go and find it. It's called A Year of Chaos, the first year of this Labour government. Lots more to do. 03444991000. Coming up, we're going to talk to Dr. Layla Hanbeck, because apparently patients would rather see a GP than all of these myriad of sort of health workers that the government are saying you can see instead with their neighbourhood medical business. Well, nobody wants it, I don't think. 10 minutes to 9.
wrong with reform that this, frankly, first of all, you know, have a press office where you tell your MPs you don't go having long-winded conversation with journalists that are off the record, OK? Get a grip. If you're going to be a professional party, get a grip of your press office. And secondly, you don't resign the whip for this. You just say, I've done nothing wrong. The party's going to stand by me if you haven't done anything wrong. It's like basically a non-story that they've now turned into front-page headlines. It's almost like they want to harm themselves. It is balmy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:53. Paul says this morning, Mike, Starmer can't fix it. First, he doesn't believe in the UK. Second, he doesn't know what to do. Third, he doesn't listen to anyone to find out what to do. Great show once again. Yeah, I know, this is so frustrating, isn't it? We know that there are people that could help Keir Starmer to understand what everybody else thinks, but he doesn't seem to want to listen. Ivor says this, Ray Division, imagine the talk on Holocaust Memorial Day if it was of reconciling Jews to Nazis. That's how ridiculous the King's words are. Where has the sense of right and wrong gone? This is on the commemoration as we speak this morning of the 7/7 terrorist attack 20 years ago today. Right now we're going to speak to Dr. Layla Hanbeck, CEO of Independent Pharmacies Association, representing independent community pharmacies across England and Wales. Dr. Layla, very good morning to you. Lots of talk about changing the way that we interface, I suppose, for want of a better word, with the NHS. A lot of people thinking that Keir Starmer's ideas of making neighbourhood hubs isn't really going to work. And a study this morning saying patients would rather see a GP than a pharmacist or a nurse.
Well, good morning. We know that patients want to see GPs face-to-face because over the past few years it's been very difficult to get a face-to-face appointment with GPs. But we also know that patients are highly satisfied with community pharmacy services, the health services that we provide, because of the accessibility, professionalism, and the fact that they can walk into their pharmacy without an appointment and speak to a healthcare professional about their minor ailments.
There was a time, I seem to remember some months ago, it might have even been under the Tories, where there was supposed to be more powers given to pharmacies so that they could do more for patients. Has that ever happened?
Yes, it did happen. And in fact, a research that was published by HealthWatch last week demonstrated that 86% of public could use pharmacy services, minor ailment services, pharmacy first as we call it, wanted to see more of it, and they were highly satisfied with those services.
Yeah, OK. And how has it changed to being running a pharmacy now then? Is it busier than it used to be? Because I remember talking at the time to people saying that's going to create a much bigger demand on pharmacies because people can't get to see their GPs a lot of the time.
So, Mike, I don't know where to start with this, but obviously as community pharmacists, we've had serious struggles with our funding because we've been asked to do more, and obviously the cost of everything goes up, and we heard about the national insurance and all the other costs going up, but our funding has not been going up as much as it should be. So we are struggling really a lot. But we are there for patients, and we are delivering those minor ailment services, and we want to do more and help our GPs for them to become free to see patients face to face as well. So, so we are here to help, but the government needs to put the money where the mouth is.
Yeah, well, they haven't got any, I'm afraid. They've spent it all, so I'm not sure if you're going to get any, but you never know. And can you now prescribe patients with drugs, or do you still have to get the doctors to do that?
Many pharmacists are now independent prescribers, so they can prescribe certain medicines, and it makes it easier because why should, for example, someone for a minor ailment go and see a doctor when they can pop into the pharmacist and see that? And that will free up our doctors and A&Es to see patients with more serious conditions.
Yeah, OK. Well, it's good to talk to you. Dr. Layla Hanbeck, thank you very much indeed, CEO of Independent Pharmacies Association, representing the pharmacies across England and Wales. Got this from Hev, who says, morning, Mike, you know what? Watching all those illegals getting on those boats in France in front of the police infuriates me, and now the taxpayer is footing the bill for Macron to come on this state visit. Makes me sick absolutely right. And one from Jim says, surely if the French stop the boats coming over to the UK, the people will stop invading France because they won't be able to achieve the freebies gifted by the UK. Surely the French would welcome this. Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? And one who said he saw me at the tennis, this is from Brian in Worthing. Morning, Mike. I hope you enjoyed the tennis this weekend. I saw you anyway. I found some damp in my ball the other day, so I got the old hairdryer out and set about fixing it. And what happened? There was a bloody power cut. So that was that. You can't even fix your foundations when you need to. Well, what you need to do is ask an expert.
Fixing the foundations is like finding damp in your wall. You can paint over it and get the hairdryer out and dry it. All done that. Hope it goes away. Or you can strip it out, rip out the plaster and deal with the problem once and for all.
Yes, fixing the foundations. This is a good one from someone who doesn't give a name, actually. Mike, if Macron's wife is coming over with him, can we ask her to give Starmer a slap for us? There's probably some kind of rule against doing that. Let's get a voice note from Paul.
Good morning, Mike. Paul in Essex. Great show, but it's constantly making me angry these days. The waste is phenomenal. I've got a funny idea that came to me. I don't know if this would work. Why don't we just all say no for the month of August? No more Indian takeaways, no more Chinese takeaways, no more Deliveroo deliveries or anything else like that. No visits to the car wash, no visits to the Turkish barber. Anybody that wants paying cash, refuse. Pay them by card, and let's just stop. Will come tumbling down around them.
Yeah.
Nice. Have a lovely day. Cheers. Bye.
1 month indeed, and apologies if you heard that word there, but never mind. Sometimes people get angry and they say them. The problem is as well, how about 1 month off paying tax? Imagine if you could spend a whole month where you could keep the money that you normally would give to the government in tax. Those of us who pay tax, of course, just ignore that if you don't pay any. But wouldn't it be great? And Graham in Colchester says this: taxis in Colchester between 8 a.m. until 9:30 and 2:45 and 3:45. We are unable to get a taxi because of the school runs. It's a massive business. I have to say, it's absolutely extraordinary what's going on. Coming up in the next hour, Isabel Oakeshot's here. Matt Vickers, Shadow Policing Minister as well. He's got something to say all about what's going on out there with Labour and this crumbling economy of ours. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. See you after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. It's been a bit of a murky start to the day, but the clouds are beginning to sort of lift slightly. At least it's a bit lighter now. It was fully dark this morning, a bit like just the middle of winter. Suddenly the sunrise had disappeared, the sunshine had gone, and it was absolute torrential rain. I'm not sure what it's like where you are, but it is going to be very warm. Coming up towards the end of the week as well. Wimbledon week, of course, carries on into the second part of the fortnight. They said they were going to do away with line judges. I know this is not the most important story of the day, but they did away with the line judges this year for the first time. I questioned it. I said, are you sure? Part of the tradition of Wimbledon is we've got those line judges. They're great. Oh, no, it's going to be fine now because AI is going to do it all. And, of course, guess what happened yesterday? There was a massive blunder in one of the games on centre court, and the effect was that the line judges and the automatic decision-making process got switched off somehow, and so a massive blunder was made when a ball was clearly out and it wasn't called out. That's the state of this country. We're going to be talking to Matt Vickers, Shadow Policing Minister. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor, also joins us. We've been talking a great deal this morning about the terrible scenario looming for Keir Starmer, because not only has he just got past one backbench rebellion, which completely weakened his authority, he's got another one coming up, because the next battle lines are being drawn around special needs provision for children. So Starmer now, because he hasn't got any money, because he spent it all, he's going to go after children who are disabled and take their special needs money away, and the backbenchers aren't going to have it. So that's a bad sign. Also, they're talking about putting a wealth tax, even though they know that tens of thousands of people have already left this country in order to get away from paying more tax under a Labour government. All sorts of bad news coming in as well from the future of the rest of this year, and whether Rachel Reeves can survive, very much open to question. We still don't really know what happened to her the other day. Meanwhile, the police on the front page of the Daily Mail saying, you know what, it'd be a really good idea if when you smell cannabis, you might go and arrest the people who are smoking it, because apparently it could be a sign that there's crime going on. Senior officers have said that the stench of drugs can make even them feel unsafe, and frontline officers should, in their words, do something about it. Really, you think? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, the migrant deal that was supposed to be the one-in, one-out system, which we knew wasn't going to work anyway, is likely to be scuppered by the European Union ahead of the state visit by Emmanuel Macron. We'll find out why things have just gone from bad to worse just over the weekend. 0344 499 1000. We are, of course, marking the anniversary of 7/7 today as well. You remember those terrible days back in 2005, 20 years ago today. So many people's lives affected, so many people's lives changed for the rest of their lives, and so many people's lives ended, of course, as well. King Charles has said we must be careful that we don't stir up too much division. Really? I think I'd like to hear him being a little bit more harsh on the people that blew everybody up. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. How about this from Steve in Devon? Morning, Mike. What makes me really mad is not only the shoplifting, the illegal immigration, the benefit cheats, etc., but the total unwillingness of this government to do anything about it. Why can't they see that by not cracking down on this stuff, it just encourages more people to do it? Well, absolutely right. And Julian Beverley says, I was listening to your show on Friday, and your last caller was the lorry driver telling us they're fined when illegals are found inside or under their lorries, assuming it's a fine for escorting. So why aren't the Border Force staff fined? They're also escorting these illegals across. It makes me sick. Thanks for what you do. The next 4 years can't come quick enough. Get Farage in to sort this mess out. Well, a new poll shows that Reform would now get 290 seats in a Westminster Parliament, which would push the Tories into fighting for third place with the Lib Dems. Matt Vickers is here. He's a Tory, Shadow Policing Minister. Matt, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. I'm sorry about the rainy weather, but, you know, we shall struggle on. Not great reading for you this morning, that particular poll, is it, from the common sense people? Or More in Common, I think they're called. Sorry, I call them Common Sense. You know, the Tories still struggling to kind of make hay in this terrible, terrible government that we've got.
Well, polls are polls, but actually in reality, we got that message from the public a year ago in that election. They sent us a message, we've got to go away, learn some of the lessons, listen to what people have got to say, come back with a different offer, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Today we're talking about removing the ability for foreigners who come to this country to claim benefits. That's the right thing to do, and it puts a real contrast. We've seen what Labour did last week, the utter mess that they made of welfare reform that was meant to save money but is going to end up costing us more money. They brought a bill forward that was 15 or 16 pages, ended up being taken down to 2. We know that Farage and his crowd are wanting to get rid of the 2-child cap on benefits, which will mean that, well, we saw the examples before it was brought in of families with 12 kids getting 40 grand in benefits, you know, limitless amounts of benefits. The reality is that hard-working taxpayers out there want to see a system that works for people who genuinely need it, but is not abused in the way it's been abused at the moment. We're seeing 3,000 people a day signing up to incapacity benefits. That is up 50% since Labour came to office. That's not sustainable. We can't continue to dole out money in benefits. We need support for the people who really need it, but we need to tighten up the restrictions on it so that only those people who need it really get it.
Right. But if you say that foreign nationals should not get benefits, how would that work exactly, and who would you target there?
So what we've seen is households with a foreign, with made up of foreigners or with a foreigner living in. The bill for those people has gone up. It's doubled. We're now paying out £1 billion a month in benefits to households which have foreign nationalism. That's just not acceptable. Right. We talk about immigration. We need to not only make it harder for people to get here, but we need to think about why do those people in that safe country in France flee to Britain? Because we're a soft touch, because we're giving away too much, because it's too easy to come here and live the good life on benefits. Well, we're saying no, you only get those benefits if you are British, if you work hard, if you contribute to the system. It's the right thing to do.
Well, we shouldn't be giving benefits to people who work either, should we? I mean, that's the whole point of the problem, because if you work a little bit and you're making up your money by getting benefits, then what's the incentive to get off the benefits and just work more?
Well, you're right. But people who have worked, people who have contributed, people who put in to the system are the people who deserve it. When something goes wrong, when you lose your job, it's meant to be a safety net and not a way of life, not a choice. Right. It's supposed to be a safety net for those people who find they lose. I mean, an increasing number of people are finding themselves out of work thanks to this government. We saw yesterday 69,000 jobs lost in the hospitality sector since they announced the jobs tax. Horrendous. The damage that we're doing, well, that the Labour government are doing to the economy has real consequences for lots of families out there who are now finding themselves in receipt of benefits because they've lost their jobs.
Yeah. A lot of people will be looking at this morning, though, Matt, and saying to themselves, hang on a minute, a lot of these foreign people who came to this country came here under the Tory government of the last 14 years, and you were the ones that gave them the benefits in the first place.
The thing is, it's getting so much worse. We've seen 3,000 people a day signing up for incapacity benefits. That's up 50%. Yeah. The number of foreign households claiming benefits has doubled. It's only a year. These guys haven't been in office for 10 years. This is a year, and the thing has doubled. It's absolutely off the charts, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, but physically speaking, in terms of those people who are claiming benefits, how do you stop that from happening then? What would you do?
You stop it, you restrict it, you say no, you become ineligible.
Well, you just take them off people.
The restrictions,
so people
living,
living,
one of the things at the moment...
If people are living, say, for example, in social housing, and they were born abroad, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the house and say, you lot, none of you are working, you're not going to get any more money from us, and we're going to kick you out of the house. What are you going to do?
You restrict the amount of cash that these people are able to access. You look at, I mean, £1 billion a month paid to households. That just can't go on.
No, I know, but what are you actually going to say?
Deserve it, the people with the credits.
Yeah, but Matt, what are you going to say to the actual individual families?
You're not going to. You see some of the money that these households get in benefits. You are going to restrict that. You're going to reduce that, and you're going to make people go home and go, I need to go to work and earn a living. That's what you're going to do. You cannot allow the thing to just keep growing at the rate it is. It's just not sustainable. And it's the taxpayer who's picking up the tab.
Yeah, but what if it makes them homeless and then they end up getting more benefits because they're homeless?
A lot of the people who are on these benefits are not in this situation where they're going to be homeless. There's a huge scale between homeless and in receipt of benefits that allow you to live very comfortably. If you come here as a foreign national, you are not going to have access to that benefit system that is going to allow you to not choose to not work.
Well, it's a fine aim. I'm just not sure how it would work. Let me just ask you about the Daily Mail's front page this morning. Top police chiefs are saying the smell of cannabis is a sign of crime. Not exactly Inspector Clouseau time here, is it, down at Scotland Yard? Apparently they've worked out that even they feel unsafe when they smell the stench of marijuana on the streets, and frontline officers should do something about it. I mean, are these actually police chiefs, or are they just people playing at it?
It's not really rocket science, but there is a bizarre school of thought that we heard about Sadiq Khan and the debate that, you know, his
he
views
wants to legalise
on the smell of
it,
weed. I mean, the damn thing stinks. Exactly, insane. There is, so it's not as black and white as we would hope and expect, as common sense would suggest, because the problem with common sense is it's not very common in this country sometimes, particularly in these Labour circles. Of course we should be clamping down. It's absolutely ridiculous that this thing is allowed to just go unabated in certain communities, that this stink takes over neighbourhoods. I mean, it absolutely reeks, as well as everything else. Usually you find the people who are dabbling in this stuff are involved in all sorts of other things as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just one final one. Robert Jenrick's out and about again this morning. He's been having a go at Riverway Law. This is the law firm that tried to remove Hamas from the UK's list of prescribed terrorist groups. They've been shut down in their current form. They've now renamed themselves Riverway to the Sea as a law firm. You say it's disgusting.
It is. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it, that some of these things are operating in plain sight. These people are qualified and meant to run an organisation that stands up and upholds the law, and instead they're, you know, putting out some, effectively advertising their services to people who are, well, anti-Semitic. It's horrendous. It's horrendous.
It is. It's awful how these things can be going on in this land of ours. Matt, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Matt Vickers, Shadow Policing Minister down there on College Green for us. Let's get a voice note from Judith on illegal.
Good morning, Mike. It's Judy from, excuse me, Altos, West Yorkshire. This government, typical Labour, tax and spend. It really is easy. Stop giving all our money away. People cannot claim benefits or legal aid until they've worked in this country for 10 years, and get rid of about a couple of hundred quangos. There, money for everybody. They really are. All they just want to do is bleed us dry. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely right. People are getting so fed up. I mean, every week I say this, but this week we've already started. It's on Monday. We've been on for 3 and a bit hours, and I haven't heard anybody as angry as this for a while. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, I mean, I agree with Matt Vickers on the issue of not giving benefits to foreigners, but he did keep dodging the question, didn't he?
Yeah.
On how do you sort of withdraw those benefits? And I must admit, I haven't given a lot of thought to that, but I think the principle is absolutely the right one. And it would be an incredibly straightforward way of saving literally billions. I mean, Keir Starmer's desperately rummaging around down the back of the sofa, it seems, to try to make up the shortfall caused by his own party refusing to contemplate any cuts on benefits. That's a way that would be very, very popular.
Well, it would, but the trouble is, again, it's the mechanisation of all of these things. You know, if you've already let it go so badly wrong and gone so far that if you've got a house full of people, all of whom are probably on one benefit or another, you know, these guys know how to milk the system, don't they? Because they've been encouraged to do it for years and years and years, and suddenly you try and bring in a way of stopping it from happening, and you'll find it impossible to do. Just deport them. You just have to deport them in the end or something, don't you?
Quite possibly. I mean, you know, the truth is that there are a lot of people claiming benefits illegitimately. So, you know, it's not just a question of saying you're a foreign national, you haven't earned this. I mean, we could start by actually reducing the number of people who are claiming benefits fraudulently.
Yeah.
We know that it's absolutely prolific, not just amongst foreign nationals, of course. I read over the weekend that's only, I think, 20%, perhaps less, of assessments for PIP are done face-to-face. You know, I know from talking to those PIP assessors that they would much rather be doing all the assessments face-to-face. The only way you can really tell straight away whether someone is or isn't, whether they do or don't have a legitimate claim to that benefit.
Yeah, well, exactly right. But when people are claiming things because they've got tennis elbow, or they've got acne, or they're a bit frightened of going out because they think they can be sort of diagnosed with agoraphobic You know, the list is endless. It just doesn't stop. And you get to the point where you think, am I the only person in Britain that's not on benefits? You know, am I the only person? I don't really seem to. I don't know anyone that's on benefits really. But clearly there are a lot more people on them than we even realise.
Well, it's just got completely out of control, hasn't it? And you know, those figures of some 3,000 people a day adding to the list of people claiming disability benefits. This is a completely insane. I mean, if there were really that many people who are incapable of doing anything, all our centres of all our towns would be just full of people in wheelchairs hobbling along on crutches and so on. I mean, it's just a complete nonsense. We all know it's a complete nonsense. Yes, there are many people who really do need the help, and they're the people who lose out if an awful lot of other people are taking the mickey, because it just leads to less resources directed at those who really need it.
And once again, it's this hangover from COVID where nobody sees anybody and everybody does everything online, and everybody knows that you can buck the system if you don't ever have to actually turn up anywhere.
Yeah, and I think there's there are whole other areas relating to children, and perhaps we'll come on to that because I heard you talking earlier on about special needs.
Yeah.
But there are whole benefits linked to your child being diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure there is a minority, a very small number of children who really do have something, you know, an actual condition. But in many cases, I'm afraid, I think that ADHD is down to bad parenting. You know, children not having enough exercise, not being disciplined, not having enough chance to run off steam. And that may be the circumstances in which households are living. You know, it's much easier if you're lucky enough to have a big garden or live in a nice village or go up to the park. But I do think that we've pathologized an awful lot of children who are just a bit bouncy.
Yeah. No, it's the medication brigade, isn't it? Once again, saying, oh yeah, that's fine, we can medicate you for that. If you're feeling a bit weird sometimes, you feel a bit anxious, you know, well, how about you just actually, you know, make people less anxious by allowing them to find out that there are ways of challenging themselves, or ways of curing themselves of that. You know, sometimes people are just a bit nervous about going out into the big wide world. Well, we probably all were at one point or other. You know, who hasn't been, you know, terrified of a job interview or an exam or something like that? It doesn't mean you need to go to a doctor and get a load of prescription pills for it. I mean, it was so bad a couple of years ago, they actually ran out of ADHD medication for children in this country, and huge numbers of parents couldn't get the stuff that they wanted their kids to have.
And a bit of me is thinking, good, you know, maybe they discovered that actually the children don't need it. I mean, I don't know, I cannot imagine putting a child on medication for not being able to pay attention. There's got to be other ways of doing it. Now, I'm not a doctor, and before a bunch of people write in complaining that I'm saying ADHD doesn't exist, I'm sure it does exist. What I'm saying is, yes, there may be a small number of children that genuinely have some kind of condition like this. But I don't think that we do children any favours at all, or indeed their parents, by just throwing pills at them for what may well be something that could be sorted out by different forms of management. You know, and those families need... I'm not saying they don't need any help. You know, this is genuine, and parents, I know how hard it is to be a parent of bouncy children. They may need other types of support, but I'm just not buying the whole, all our kids, all these thousands and thousands of children need to be put on drugs to control their behaviour. It's like, come on, it's a nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think so. Let me finish up with some net zero breaking news, latest from the world of Ed Miliband. We got a school that went on fire because the solar panels spontaneously combusted up in the northeast of England, which raises all sorts of questions about the toxic nature of the smoke that comes off these things, and also of how likely that is to continue to happen because of hot weather. Now we've also been told that Legionnaire's disease could be a big problem if you've got a heat pump, because the water isn't heated to a sufficient temperature to completely wipe out any of the bacteria in there. So, you know, not a good start to the week for net zero lovers.
Oh dear. I mean, solar panels, there's a lot of them round where I live in the Cotswolds, and you know, sometimes I look at them, and when the sun's shining on them, which is not very often unless you happen to be having a good summer like we are, they can look almost like water.
Yeah.
So they're not most offensive of things, you know, versus, for example, loads of wind turbines or hideous
pylons or something.
But the idea that we should be carpeting vast swathes of our countryside in these things just seems to me completely topsy-turvy. And now we hear that at one point they were producing too much energy, which can't be stored properly, and that the companies were having to be incentivized to switch them off.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just completely bonkers, isn't it?
It really is. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it's the one area which Starmer absolutely steadfastly refuses to pull back the expenditure on. You know, almost everywhere else he's going, he's trying to make cuts here, there and everywhere. But net zero, no. He's absolutely spending as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, and I think another thing that isn't calculated in all those costs is all the public buildings that now have to comply with so many net zero regulations that they are costing many, many millions more than they need to cost. This is out of public money, whether it's a school or a hospital or whatever. The net zero cost of our public construction projects is absolutely astronomical. And I don't know whether anyone has done any research on this, whether it's been collated in any way, but I think that people would be shocked at how much more expensive basic infrastructure is. All these sort of, as I say, whether it's a GP surgery or a new nursery school or whatever, they all now have to comply with a bunch of absolutely daft stuff, which adds millions to the cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, absolutely right. Isabel, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott Talks international editor. Don in Chelmsford says the Labour left have smelt blood with Captain U-turn Starmer. They'll be forcing him to, again, spend money we don't have. Rather than soak the rich, he needs to scrap net zero. Couldn't agree with you more. Let's get a voice note from Caroline.
Morning, Mike. Here in Wales, they're trying to close down our pharmacies. But yet our pharmacies are like a part of our family. Obviously, you go into the chemist more and more than you see the doctor to pick up your medication. And it becomes quite a small little family, and it's disgusting that the government is trying to get rid of the pharmacies.
That'll be the Labour government, right? Which is trying to get rid of all sorts of things, including anybody who drives faster than 20 miles an hour on any road. What is going on in Wales? There's going to be big elections coming in Wales, local elections, of course, for the Senedd, which Reform are pretty confident they're going to win. They haven't seen any polls recently, but I'm sure when we see the next one, it will look as though Reform could end up running Wales, which could be quite remarkable. If Donald Trump can secure 1,900 miles of border, I'm sure we can manage 100 miles of beach in the year of 2025. Transfer all benefits to illegals to fund our borders. It's simple. They know it's simple, which is why we know they want to keep illegals coming, says Aaron. Yeah, I mean, you would think, but I think somehow it's more difficult. I don't know why. I can't explain it. 9:25. Ed Davey, who we haven't seen out and about for ages, and doesn't seem to speak out about very much, was so concerned about this that he was demanding that there was some kind of, national emergency. The heat wave lasted 2 days. It was Monday, it was Tuesday. Yeah, it was a bit hot, and it wasn't very nice on the tube. But, there are parts of Britain where people were getting in touch with me going, it's pouring with rain here.
Also,
it's about 15 degrees. Bring it on. Let's have some global warming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to very nearly 9:30. Half an hour to go. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here, of course. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Hi, Mike. Mark from Manchester. I heard the man just on about his bad back and he doesn't get everything and he feels like we're talking about him. It's not about people who have worked. If you put him into the system for 10 years, you should be paid in cash. If you've never put into the system, you should be getting vouchers for food, electric, water, gas, everything. If you're not put in, you shouldn't be getting cash, full stop.
Yeah, I think that's a good sort of bar for it, because you're going to do something here, right? Tracy says there is still a shortage for ADHD medication. My son had autism and ADHD. I would challenge Isabel Oakeshott to spend a week with my son when we can't get his meds. Linda from Wolverhampton, who's a childcare provider, says Isabel is so right. Parents are so easily labelling their children. Most of them are just lively children who need to run off steam and cut out some of the sugar intake. I know teachers who don't agree with the parents, but they go off to the doctors getting their children diagnosed as autistic, ADHD, so they can claim money. Some just know how to play the system. Of course, there are genuine cases out there, but are so many children sadly being given pills? It's dangerous it's a form of child abuse. Yeah, see, so there's a lot of different schools of thought on the whole ADHD thing. I think there's certainly people who are correctly diagnosed, but then there are probably some people who shouldn't be as well. Let's talk to Mike Neville now, though, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. The news at the weekend that Palestine Action had been prescribed as a terrorist organisation meant that police, when they decided to demonstrate on the streets of London, were kind of duty-bound to arrest them. They arrested 29 protesters on suspicion of terror offences, but Palestine Action kind of standing up to them and saying, well, we're just going to change our name, we're just going to change what we do, we're not a terrorist organisation, we're not the same as Hamas or the same as Al-Qaeda. We'll find out what Mike says. Mike, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
It seems to be taking a hell of a time, doesn't it, to get this organisation under control. It might well be that there would be those who would say, well, why should they be under control? They're not doing anything terrible. But the police have said in the past that they have actually done terrible things. They've committed acts of vandalism, they've used weapons, they've attacked people, they've intimidated people. You know, they might not be Al-Qaeda, but they have now been outlawed as an organisation because of their terrorist activities.
Well, they must be serious in the sense that most of the Labour MPs voted to prescribe them under the Terrorism Act of 2000. And it goes further, of course, than vandalism, doesn't it, Mike? They sabotage, that's the word I would use, sabotage 2 RAF aircraft to the point of £7 million. But not only did they sabotage them, this is at a time when we're all manner of global conflicts and threats around us. And so to take away the capability from our Royal Air Force, it is an act of terrorism, in my view, and they deserve all they get.
Yeah, but I mean, they say that they're going to get around the law, don't they? And they've taken legal advice because they're quite well funded. If they change their name, that might be a simple thing to do that will mean that they can carry on demonstrating because they're no longer called Palestine Action.
Yeah, and we saw that in Northern Ireland, didn't we, with the IRA, the Provisional IRA, the Irish National Liberation Army. So these organisations are like the Hydra. You know, you chop one head off and 2 more grow. But there's what gets me with this organisation is there's all the usual idiots involved. There's this Reverend Sue Parfitt, who's the 80-odd-year-old vicar who's been arrested 20-odd times. And my mother used to say there's one thing worse than a fool, and it's an old fool. And so you've just got these usual individuals who are involved in this, who the people involved in terrorism and the like, in Hamas and whatever, will see these. Remember Jeremy Corbyn referred to our friends and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They will see these people as useful idiots. But what does strike me is, as I said at the start, Mike, is that the Labour side of the House were the ones who were really pushing for this. So it strikes me that they must see this organisation as a definite threat.
Yes, and they have to be treated as such, because otherwise, you know, we saw when suddenly, you know, the police started clamping down a lot more on Just Stop Oil, they just stopped, really. They didn't do any more demos because they didn't actually fancy spending a lot of time in jail.
That's right, and the punishments dished out there were some substantial prison sentences. But I just, with this organisation here, they crossed the Rubicon when they attacked those planes.
Yeah.
We can all put up with people waving silly signs and their daft flags and all this sort of thing, and we put up with all these demonstrations in London, which have, you know, really impacted on the Jewish community and the like. But once you start to attack our armed forces and take away their capabilities, something has to be done.
Yeah, I think so. Mike, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector saying, you know, these people have to be stopped because they are creating not just a nuisance, they are creating criminal acts, many of which could be regarded as terrorist acts. Clay says this from Folkestone: Mike, the way I would save on benefits, I would take the living wage, multiply it by 40, that's for the working week. You pay tax and national insurance on that, you get that for 3 months, then reduce it by 25%, then after another 3 more months by another 25% every 3 months until it gets to nothing. Great show. Best wishes, Clay, in Folkestone. And Leslie says, a young man near me is only prepared to work 16 hours a week. With his in-work benefits, he receives more than a full-time worker. Well, this is the thing. These are people that know precisely what they're doing. And they can tell the social that they're only doing a 16-hour week. Meanwhile, they can be doing a more than 16-hour week and just raking in the money, because they pretend that that's what they're doing. Here's one from Pete in Bolton. I turned 66 in May and decided to keep working on minimum wage as I've still got a mortgage. I also started to draw my pension, of which I'm taxed for the privilege, yet all the illegals get everything handed on a silver plate. It's so annoying. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to speak to Professor Anthony Glees, Director of the Centre for Security and Intelligence Studies at the University of Buckingham. We'll find out from him whether Britain is safer now than it was on 7/7.
Across the UK on DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:37. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Another 20 minutes or so, Julie Hollick-Grew will be here. It is the anniversary of 7/7 this morning, of course. The victims are going to be remembered 20 years on from the attacks. We've already seen Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan at the 7/7 memorial, laying wreaths there, and there'll be a tribute at the St Paul's Cathedral. We'll hear from the King as well. Right now, to speak to Professor Anthony Glees, Director of the Centre for Security and Intelligence Studies at the University of Buckingham. Professor, very good morning to you. The question posed today is Britain safer today than it was then, back in 2005?
Well, in some very important senses, I think the answer is yes, we are safer, because some of the issues that we learnt about after 7/7, and you know how well I remember it, I'm sure you do too, Mike, that horrific day when 52 people were killed and almost 1,000 people were injured. We have a much stronger security service, MI5, led by a very tough and determined Director General. So Ken McCallum is not a man anybody in their right mind would mess with. And we have much better coordination between MI5, the counter-terrorist police, who are the best in the world, and the other secret agencies that we run. We also have given MI5 and other agencies far more powers to intercept the communications of people who wish to do us harm. So that's all on the positive side, and why I don't myself think we're likely to see another 7/7 style attack in London. On the other hand, it is true that there are a large number of Islamists and other terrorists out there who wish to see us do harm. I mean, MI5 has told us it has disrupted at least 43 late-stage terror plots over the past few years. So there's a lot of trouble there. And, of course, we've got the ongoing conflict in Gaza, which radicalizes people. And we've seen a move away from groups who can be, in theory, identified because they're groups taking instruction from leaders and radical preachers, to individual kind of lone wolf activists who are in touch with the preachers and the radicalizers, but via the dark web and, you know, WhatsApp and all these groups. The MI5 can get at their communications. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the communications help the terrorists, the would-be terrorists. On the other hand, they also help the security authorities get hold of them before they do damage. So it's slightly mixed, but on the whole, I'm positive. Yes.
And one of the things that we see, I suppose, less of, thankfully, is the suicide bomber. You know, that was very much a thing, wasn't it, when 7/7 happened? And then I remember also the time they tried to repeat it. I think it was on the 21st, a couple of weeks later. They tried to do a similar explosion in a sort of a cross formation, and none of the detonators went off. But, you know, we tend to see now, if there are terrorist attacks, people driving cars at people, perhaps. We've seen it in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. You know, you don't tend to see suicide bombers much. I don't want to tempt fate, but is there a reason for that?
Well, I'm not entirely sure about that. I mean, we think of the awful bombing at the Manchester Arena. When 22 people were killed and over 1,000 people injured there. And that was a failure by MI5, and I think MI5 admits that. They say they can't get it right all the time. And by local security as well. And local security and, everybody. It was a terrible set of errors and accidents. I think we are still seeing individuals prepared to kill themselves in the commission of a terrorist act, but what we're not seeing is that it come to fruition. The security services have a much better idea of whom to look for and what to look for than they did have 20 years ago, when it was all, you know, rather hazy and there was no joined up thinking. So we need to be very mindful that there are still very, very crazy people out there who may be prepared to die in order to get their message across. And that's why I think, I mean, I very much agree with what your previous guest, Commander Neville, was saying about the importance of recognizing Palestine Action, for example, as a radicalizing group in the United Kingdom. Yeah, the war in Gaza is revolting. We all know that. We don't need to be told by these aged people that it is revolting. But you cannot sabotage this country and our defense forces and stir the minds of young people who may think that violence is the way to change the Middle East. If ever there was an example that terrorism does not lead to peace, it would be what happened on the 7th of October 2023, when Hamas attacked Israel and killed 1,000 people, or Israel's very brutal response to that. There has to be a better way forward. An intelligence-led policing is excellent. The one thing I would say, if I may, is that people like me have been very disturbed by the fact that the government, not just this government, but previous governments, since 2015, in effect, have been less interested in parliamentary scrutiny of what our security and intelligence services do. The Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament used to be a really powerful group of senior politicians who could keep MI5, MI6 and others under very close scrutiny. Their powers have dwindled, so we lack accountability. And we learnt from 7/7 that holding the feet of our security community to the fire was one way we have got much better security today.
Yeah, I mean, the problem for us, I suppose, is money, as it always is, in terms of how much you can spend on it. I mean, Keir Starmer said to us, what, only last month, that we're on a war footing because we get attacked by Russia every single week, every single day sometimes. It doesn't feel like he's mentioned that since then. We've also got, you know, the worry of so many people being in this country. I mean, we understand, I saw a figure the other day that there's something like 500 terrorists who are currently people walking the streets who have been inside prison for various offences that they've committed in the past, and now they're out. And nobody really knows if they've been, you know, and they've had their sort of claws removed, if you like, or whether they still believe the things that they believe. The terrorists in the Daily Telegraph today teaching gangster inmates how to make bombs in British prisons because there's a problem with Islamist gangs. You know, there's an awful lot going on, it would seem, in this sphere that we don't really know about. So in a way, I'm surprised. I'm glad that you say we feel safer and we are safer than we were, but it hasn't gone away, has it?
Oh, it definitely hasn't gone away. And in some sense, as I say, it's got worse. It's just that our security community has, on the whole, got much better at knowing where to look and who to look for. But the fact that young people out there are turning to terrorism, the fact that making sure we know that they're doing this is becoming increasingly complex, particularly with, you know, the American social media platforms that don't like the fact that we don't want complete end-to-end encryption in this country. Yeah, that's why we don't want people to communicate in such a way that our guys in GCHQ in Cheltenham and MI5 in Thames House can no longer pick up their messages. We need to be able to read their messages. If you've got nothing to hide, you really shouldn't worry about these powers, and they are carefully legislated. MI5 is not blameless, as I say, but we should never forget these are incredibly brave people, like the cops, even other cops on the clip you showed of Palestine Action. They walk towards those who want to do us harm. They don't walk away from them. And as long as we have people like that, and we are very aware of the distinction between Islam and Islamism. But where we find Islamism, we are absolutely right to go after it. And the horrific attacks of 7/7 and those that followed a fortnight later, the Manchester Arena, they must ensure we do not take our foot off the accelerator. Security is absolutely vital. All the other things we want in this fair island of ours come only if we are secure in our shores.
Yeah. Very well said. Professor Anthony Glees, thank you very much indeed, Director for the Centre for Security and Intelligence Studies at the University of Buckingham. We'll be speaking coming up in a little while to Elizabeth Kenworthy, MBE, off-duty police officer who assisted tube passengers at Aldgate Station. Let's get a quick voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire. Great show as always. Just listening to you and Isabel talking about benefits. It's interesting. We should really be giving benefits to people to help them work, if that makes sense. My husband's completely blind and has been for about 20 years. He runs a business. He pays a lot of tax, as we do together. He's self-employed and has always made sure he worked. The only thing that he gets, which is incredibly helpful, is a small amount of money from the government from something called Access to Work. It was one of the few good things that Gordon Brown did, which means that he can get someone to help him go to meetings, meet him at a station occasionally, that sort of thing. I can't do it for him, and they don't cover that sort of cost. So there's no way of fiddling it, and it has to go through a job centre. But it means that he can work and pay tax. And I don't know anyone who wouldn't think that is a sensible benefit. But paying people to stay at home, moronic people who just think somebody else pays for that, the government pays for it, is totally out of order, and it needs a complete rethink. Thanks so much, Mike. Great show.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Getting people back to work or into work is clearly a much better idea than paying them not to work. It surely makes sense to almost anyone with a brain, doesn't it? Andy says this in Alicante. I moved to Spain. As I've never contributed here, I get no benefits or free healthcare for at least 5 years, which is totally reasonable. Why is it different in the UK? Very good question. Very good question indeed. This is Morning Glory.
It normally takes a government a few years to have a few scandals, but it only took a matter of weeks for this government to manage them.
Barely 6 weeks into Keir Starmer's time as Prime Minister, the first big scandal erupted. Lord Ali, a Labour donor very close to Keir Starmer, he lent him his flat, for example. He had been supplying clothes for Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria, and even glasses as well.
First of all, it's like, who bought your bins there, Sakia? Is that your little mate in charge of ASOS who's in and out of number 10 and he doesn't actually have a job? Oh, giving you his apartment as well, has he?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:52. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, for another 7 or 8 minutes. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along to take you through after 10 o'clock, all the way through into the afternoon, 1 as well. We've been talking about a great many things this morning, including, of course, the anniversary of 7/7, which is today. 20 years ago, it was a terrible scene in London where 3 separate explosions went off on the tube and then one on a bus as well. One of those explosions was at Aldgate Station. Elizabeth Kenworthy joins me now, MBE. She was an off-duty police officer who assisted some of the tube passengers on that dreadful day at Aldgate. She joins me now. Elizabeth, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. You're retired from the police service now, but tell us how you are, what you're thinking today as you come into London.
Well, it's a very sad day, as this anniversary always is, and we're marking it specially this year because it's the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
So we've been to lay flowers at the site, and now we're on a bus and we're heading to St Paul's Cathedral for a service.
Yes. And on that day, it was a very confusing morning, wasn't it, in Aldgate? Nobody really knew what was going on or what had happened. You were off duty?
Yes, I was travelling on the train to a conference in Westminster, so I was on the Circle line when the bomb went off. But I, like everybody else, I didn't know what had happened to start with until I got into the scene and realised that it was an explosion and not a crash.
Right. And so, what was the first thing you saw that made you realise how bad it was?
Well, the state of the carriage. Without going into too much detail, it was pretty grim.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was clearly an explosion, not a crash.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at that time, and we were just asking a question today, do we feel like the streets are safer now than they were then? But it was so unexpected, wasn't it, on that morning?
Totally unexpected. Yeah. We haven't experienced anything like that in London before, although of course we'd obviously had IRA bombs and things like that going off previously, but nothing on the underground, nothing on the transport system.
And were you able to help an awful lot of people? I mean, obviously the injuries must have been pretty awful for some people, and many people died. But were you able to help a lot of people?
I helped. I did the best I could with basic first aid. Yes.
Okay. And when did you realise that it was more than just Aldgate? When did that happen?
Well, I didn't realise that until I got out from the station, and some people in the office let me use their facilities, and they had a TV on, and then we saw that there were other places that bombs had gone off, and then I knew that it wasn't a power surge. It was something coordinated attack.
Right.
But it was a good hour afterwards. Yes.
Right.
Yes, after I'd come out of the station.
Okay. And how long did you stay there?
About 3/4 of an hour from the time it went off to the time the fire brigade and the paramedics arrived, and then I let them take out do what I'd done what I could for my people I was looking after, and I let them deal with it, and there's nothing more I could do really.
Yeah. And as you go to St Paul's Cathedral today, I mean, what are you hoping for today? What are you hoping to see, and what are you hoping to hear?
Well, I'm looking forward to being reunited with some of the other survivors and people who helped us along the way, and some of the police officers who were so good, and the solicitors who helped with the families and the bereaved, and made sure that the government paid attention.
Yeah.
So those people I'm really looking forward to seeing again, and obviously saying my respect and quiet reflection of what happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was a dreadful day, it really was. Elizabeth Kenworthy, thank you very much indeed. Elizabeth Kenworthy, MBE, off-duty police officer who happened to be at Aldgate Station on the Circle line when one of those bombs exploded. And as I say, many of you might not remember it, or you might not have been around in those days, but those of you who do, it was just a dreadful thing. And whether or not we're safer now than before, it's hard to say. But there will be coverage of that service, of course, at St Paul's throughout the day here on Talk. Gary says this, regarding the proposed one-in and one-out migration deal with the European Union, given the incompetence with which Keir Starmer handles every other negotiation on behalf of the UK, don't be too surprised if this week he shakes hands with Macron on a two-in, none-out deal, with us paying £500 million to Brussels every year for the privilege. You know, that wouldn't be at all surprising, would it? Because everything that we seem to negotiate, from the Chagos Islands to the US trade deal, to any deals that we do with the European Union, none of it seems to work. One from Winston in London. He says, "Morning, Mike, love the show. Do you ever feel more frustration, more defeatism, or more determination to stand firm in the calls and messages you receive? I'm a determined, stubborn bugger, but they're beginning to grind me down. And with some exceptions, younger people don't appear to care, as long as their food turns up at the front door. I won't give up. But when people like the Stockport murderer is given, you mean Southport murderer, is given a kettle, for example, and that poor prison officer is probably scarred for life, it does make you sick. I would manacle him to a wall and he'd get a bowl of water and a bit of food each day, but nothing else. That's punishment worthy of the crime, since the death penalty isn't allowed. Anyway, keep fighting the good fight, Mike. Regards, Winston." Thank you very much indeed. I think people do get frustrated. You can, but listen, you just have to keep going, I think. I think that's the way to go. Right now, though, it's competition time. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester on July the 19th. We'll also put you up in a hotel and give you £5 grand spending money. Here's everything you need to know and how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and £5 grand spending money. Text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
And there we are. It's coming up to very nearly 1 minute to 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here.
There we are.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, how are you?
Happy Monday morning.
Happy Monday.
Is it terrible that I'm quite relieved to have a little bit of rain and
Bit of rain. I
just
didn't
have
know
a
it was
little bit
coming.
of a break. You just take a bit of a break.
Yes.